Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, episode 10. Our guest today is Ryon Beachner. Ryon is known for being the owner and overall runner of things over there at Two Wild Karting. Before that, he's a bit of a wheelman in his own right, and we're going to talk to him a little bit more about Two Wild, his driving career, and what's been going on since then, before then, all that kinds of stuff when we get him on. Of course, before that, we're going to have a little bit of current events, just kind of BS a little bit before we get rolling. Dirk, we are open. Cal Speed is open.
The long-awaited moment.
Yeah, it's we actually we're open today.
Yeah,
right. This is
our first
June,
day back.
Yeah, June 12th here at Cal Speed. We actually opened up for the first time, and pretty low key. We had just rental stuff and whatnot, but what it did mean is that we had to. Well, actually, we had already tore it down our quote studio.
Right.
Cal Speed open. That's cool, but there's a bit of a byproduct, my friend.
Yeah. What was everyone else doing today when we were at work?
I think they were all playing around and having a good old time at Willow for the Pro Kart rounds 2 and 3 practice day here on Friday.
We just got to go last weekend.
Yeah,
get some practice in and whatnot.
Yeah,
You were doing proper testing and stuff, but
yeah.
I was there just effing around. But
on the last podcast, I think when we with Alyssa, maybe even with Travis too. I think both of them. Yeah, we were talking about going over to Willow and getting a chance to for you try a new track for the first time.
Yeah,
and for me testing for the Pro Kart race that turns out I'm not going to end up being at, but yeah, it felt good to get on course for both of us. It was it was 3 months of being down, not running, and then to get out on course, and I was on
nice
the
to
X30.
See we didn't suck.
Yeah,
after 3 months out,
X30 for me and KA100 for you, and felt it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the next,
and the one after that actually.
Yeah,
I think I got a little over 100 laps. I think.
I think I got just under. You may have done a little bit more than me.
Yeah,
because I know there was a few sessions I just tried to watch.
Yeah, and I got one session in the in 100cc thanks to HRT and Daniel Eaton for letting me use his ride. So I got a chance to try the new. I think it was the new blue tire.
I think so. Yeah.
Vinco blue. That's on the 100cc. I got a chance to try that and run around the course with his deal. And it wasn't set up for me, and the gearing wasn't right for Masters and all that other kinds of stuff, but. Still got a chance to try it out. Man, I felt good in the X30 though. Felt real good.
It looks solid.
Man.
It's a fun little track too.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
it's really or I call it the last section. It's actually the first section. So the way they got it is you go at the grid, right? Mm-hmm. You're going down in turn number 4, I think they call it.
Yeah,
but I always thought that was turn 1, the way we were doing for practice.
Right.
But so what I called the last complex before that is actually turn 1, 2, 3.
The bus stop into that
little chicane
hairpin
thing.
left.
Yeah. That was the one piece I was trying to figure out. But yeah, it was pretty fun. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a lower grip track. There was a lot of wind that day.
Yeah, which sounds like it's the norm for up there.
Yeah, it sounds like they had a good amount of wind today too. But so yeah, the downside is that we ain't going. Well, you were going to go work. You were going to go tune for our buddy Mark Connell.
Yeah.
He actually is going to be hooked up with one of our previous guests, Stephen Clark.
I like to say he upgraded. So maybe it was fate that I wasn't working for him.
Yeah. And it was funny too, is I actually kind of convinced him to do the Pro Kart race. So between me going, hey, you should really do Pro Kart.
I'll be there. Derek will be there. It'll be fun.
I'll get Derek to help you out, and then we all bail on him. Luckily, like you said, you were able to get Stephen Clark to go do it, but. Yeah, so kind of a pisser. That for me, it's a doubleheader, so that's pretty much the end of the Pro Kart Championship for me. I'm not really gonna do that so much, and the focus now turns into maybe getting the Vegas races going, Rock the Rio, obviously Super Nats, try to give those another go.
But we had a busy day today to kind of keep our minds off of it, and
like we had talked about it. Once you kind of flip the switch and kind of get over the quote disappointment, right, of not being able to go, it's like, well, we still really like doing this stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Being here at Cal Speed's a blast. And
it'd be one thing if you had to miss it because of some other reason, and you're just sitting at home, whether can't afford it, whatever schedule may have happened, but the fact that you were, I got work, I got to go do that, and
Yeah, it's a pretty good handoff.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't go racing, but I'm still going to go to the racetrack and do what I love doing. So,
Right.
yeah, not bad at all. Been a pretty hectic week trying to get things going. We had Cal Speed Live that we got a chance to do. That's a hell of a lot of fun.
That's a good time.
I got a chance to do
involved.
face-to-face with Howden & Co. over at eKarting News. That was a little bit of fun, too.
A little bit.
And we're going racing with the Arrive and Drive stuff starting next week. So we're going to kind of and we announced the Oval.
Yes.
One of my favorite events. I know you're a huge fan as well. So, yeah, we ain't going racing. You might go at the end of July with LAKC.
Yeah.
Hopefully everything goes well at the end of July there. I do want to point out, though, another current event. We're going to go to we've been doing these every week.
Yes.
Since we kicked things off at the beginning of April. And we're actually going to switch to a every other week. So you're going to see these every 2 weeks. It's just because we're back to the game here, rolling, and just
It's
the
hard
amount
to
of
do
time.
this with the work schedule. So
Yeah, and trying to get some guests,
Yeah.
I mean...
now everyone's going to have their stuff to do as well.
Exactly. We're going to try to snag people after practice, maybe some on locations and stuff like that, but every 2 weeks is what we're going to do. So if you were used to us for the first 10 episodes, now 11 actually, for every week, it's going to be every other. We're going to try to fill in the gaps with some little fun stuff here and there with maybe previous episodes, things like that, maybe some clips, but expect to see us, or listen to us, I should say, every two, starting after this.
As far as guests go, like you've seen a few times on the social media posts between Facebook and Instagram, by all means, drop a line or, leave a comment saying who is someone you'd want to be, or you'd want to see here interviewed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be kind of the deal. We're going to have some more time.
Mm-hmm.
In between events to try to secure these interviews and chat with people. What do you want to hear? What do you want us to? You got a cool story or somebody that you want to hear it, and or at least share the love a little bit on that deal? Let us know. But I'll tell you, somebody who's got a lot of experience in the karting game, not just as a driver, but now as a actual person in the industry, if you will, a team owner, a shop owner, and more than that, is Ryon Beachner, and I think this is the perfect time. Without further ado, let's go and bring on Ryon Beachner. Ryon Beachner, thanks for coming up, bud.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me out.
Hey, man, this is kind of an interesting deal because it's the first time we've done a podcast, and actually we had go-karts going around the track today, and it was Arrive and Drive pretty much the entire day. We haven't had a competition kart coming around here at Cal Speed yet, but we're kind of getting back in the swing. We said in the current events we're going to be doing these things like every other week instead of every week like we have been. But as far as on an every week, every day basis, what do you do? I mean, I know that you've got the biz and whatnot, but I know there's other things that have nothing to do with karting that you're playing around with.
Yeah, so when the I don't really call it a lockdown, but everybody refers to it as a lockdown. When all of that first happened, all of my streams of income stopped, and I've been self-employed since forever. I think I've worked like 1 or 2 legitimate real jobs. So I don't qualify for unemployment. I had a good year last year, so I didn't get a stimulus check. So everything dried up all at once. So we actually started getting involved in coronavirus testing.
Had to get a little creative.
Yeah, which if somebody would have told me 6 months ago that, the world was going to come to a screeching halt and a go-kart shop owner was going to be trying to find a way to get people safely back to work, I would have called you completely insane. But no, kind of met with the right people at the right time, and for the last, I guess, better part of 2 months, we've been setting up to get ready to try and do some testing and get people back to work in a way that's safe for local municipalities, for employers, for whatever it is.
So while you are the owner proprietor of Two Wild Karting,
Yes.
you haven't been doing any karting obviously, and you've had to think outside the box.
Yeah.
and trying to figure out ways to make that income, as you say,
Yep.
not making the and Rob Niles, who owns Calsby, kind of the same boat. No go-karts going around the track, no income coming in, and as an owner, you're not making any money either.
Yeah, no, everything just stops. So
Exactly.
it immediately, I mean, it was cool for about a week because, everybody's attitude in the first week was, it'll blow over, it's all going to be good.
Right.
And here we are 3 months later.
Still saying, it'll blow over.
Yeah, exactly. No.
As the guy who owns the business, and you're the one looking at the bank accounts, and everything's going the wrong direction.
Yeah, when you feel I mean, I've gone through having everything stolen from me in the last, call it, year and a half, to then having one of the best years I've ever had, to then watching that nest egg that I've got just slowly slip away. It's a special kind of nerve-wracking. So, just started talking with everybody, different customers. One thing I will say I'm incredibly fortunate with is I did a little bit of college, but my formal education was kind of jumping right into running a business, and the networking that comes along with the motorsports industry is
You're
fantastic.
You're learning hands-on everything for sure.
Yeah, no, and the running joke of how do you make a small fortune in karting? Start with a big one. Well, when I took over the business, there was no big one. So if you want to do some advertising, you figure out how to do it. You want to go ahead and set everything up, you're on your own. So
And as you say, the networking, the people you have met over
Yeah.
the years has been paying dividends lately.
no, and absolutely. I mean, it's opened up so many doors for me in all different facets of my life that I never even thought would be a thing.
I got to assume that you probably had the same situation that I know that Derek and I and whatnot, we've gotten the same kind of messages. When this all this stuff hey, we're going to be doing this for a while.
Right.
We got messages from our friends and people that we knew. Hey, what do you need? Do you want to do something else? That kind of stuff. Try to help out. I got to imagine kind of the same scenario. At least maybe people you knew that maybe they knew you could take advantage in some way, shape, or form, given the business.
Maybe people you're not friends with on Facebook reached out.
No, I mean,
I've seen some of the comments you've left on people's pages.
yeah, I mean, no, no, I try and be pretty I don't know. I won't say something unless I'm pretty confident it's just kind of a statement of it is what it is, because generally speaking, whenever I share opinions, it's kind of everybody has a bad time. So,
But
no,
you get any love? People reach out?
I mean, here and there. But I kind of took it upon myself I've been involved with, making sure everybody has their Hoosier tires and stuff like that. So,
Right.
at the very beginning of all this was the weekend before Tri-C, and there was
Right.
a bunch of dealers who were needing rain tires. They needed normal tires, whatever it was. So then next thing you know, the race gets canceled, and nobody knows when we're going to be at the track next. So, the first thing I did was call everybody who had an order that I was supposed to be dropping off and say, listen, if you guys just want to cancel all this stuff, no problem. I'll put it back on my shelf, and, you guys have bigger problems right now. So I work kind of with everybody in Southern California right now. And there was a couple people that I called and just said, if you need to pay me a little late, totally fine. Their priorities needs to be putting food on the table and, making sure life goes on.
So even though you definitely had your own stuff that you had to worry about, you were conscious of you're not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's people in a lot harder positions than me. And thankfully, going into all of this, is it how I wanted to go ahead and use the money I've set aside? I mean, really what I wanted was a down payment on a house. But I know that, the way people conduct themselves when these types of things happen is really what speaks to their character. And I know that being new on not necessarily on the business side, but working with other people who were, call it, my competitors, if I can go out of my way to make sure that, them and their families are taken care of, if the shoe's on the other foot, I would hope they do the same thing.
Yeah, you
for
got to
me.
imagine it's going to be reciprocated a little bit.
So I mean, thankfully I'm in a position where I'm relatively insulated from it, stemming from a good year last year. It's not how I want to spend my money, but I'm I'm very thankful for it. And also, I think doing those types of things pays off in the end.
For sure. And so lately, you've got Two Wild Karting.
Yep.
Which has been doing no karting.
Yeah.
And like we talked
play
about,
on
you were able
words.
to get around it and also the kinds of stuff. Let's kind of just talk about the biz,
Sure.
And not of recent, but like you said, you had a bunch of stuff stolen from you, whatnot. But let's go to the beginning. As you said before we went on air here, that it was actually your dad, Rod, that
Yes.
started it. So let's talk about the very, if you don't mind, the very
Yeah,
beginning of Two Wild and when you were just a munchkin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was all of about 4 years old the first time I saw a go-kart. It was... My dad had come home from a manufacturing trade show in, I think it was Cincinnati, Ohio.
Sorry, real quick, and maybe that's a good pause point.
Yeah.
Oh, what was Rod doing? What was Rod
Okay.
Beachner doing at that point? That
Yeah,
he's going
so-
to a trade show that even before he gets into a car
So
shop.
my family background is...
And maybe we should have Rod on the podcast at some point.
Oh God. That would be really interesting. My family background is CNC manufacturing. My dad, did a little bit of college, but it was, call it the 80s when he got out. So it was before, there was as rigid of a political pressure for people to go that route. He worked at a couple different large aerospace manufacturing companies, and then with a couple of his friends, branched off and basically started doing stuff in the evenings and grew it into a pretty successful business. So it was him, one of his longtime high school friends, and then actually that guy's uncle, who they all grew up racing motocross together. Their thing was, they're all kind of adrenaline junkies. They all had Sea-Doos. They all had motocross bikes. They all
Something
had
with
boats.
an engine on it. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all gearheads. They were always, go out to the desert, ride motorcycles. They did, I can't remember, but there's a lot of like desert GP racing or whatever it was called.
Like enduro bikes or something like that.
Kind of. He raced down at the old LA Coliseum, did stuff like that. He wasn't some famous motocross racer. He was definitely somebody who, had a passion for it, loved doing it, but, he's not Jeremy McGrath. So he got to a point where they're traveling around trying to pick up new work with manufacturing company. They were at a trade show in Ohio, wound up running into a small operation that had go-karts. Small operations, some of you may know as SSE.
Oh, wow.
Shout out to Joe Ramos. Ran into him there. They're in the hall and see everything, think it's badass. There's probably nothing to it. They end up at another trade show, I think it was 6 months or a year after the fact, run into him again. And finally he's like, you know what?
First time fool me.
Yeah,
right.
I know. So they all kind of got to a point where they're like, we have this business, we all have kids, we have families, we can't go out there and just, break legs and mess ourselves up. We've got responsibilities.
Just talking about the two-wheel stuff. And
Exactly, with motocross. So they looked at karting as something of, this looks fun. At the time, it was all motorcycle engines, which we're finally getting away from that. Different tangent. So they said, okay, we want to have another side of the business, which isn't in manufacturing. We want to retail some stuff, get away from the product liability insurance, get away from all of that, those challenges that they were just tired of dealing with on an everyday basis. So they put the money up, bought karts, bought into with SSC as a dealer, and Two Wild Karting was born. So around
you
that
said
time,
circa 96-ish.
96, 97. It's hazy because I was 4. So
Surprised you weren't paying more attention.
I was going to say, yeah, don't take a
Exactly.
lot of notes, young Ryan Beachner.
Yeah.
yeah, my handwriting was crap. I can't read any of it looking back on it. It's a shame. No, so I remember my dad, I would always go into work after school or whatever to hang out, see what was going on. I always loved watching the machines run.
The shop was pretty local to your house and school, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Shop at the time was 5 minutes from my house. I mean,
Okay.
it was real close. So I would, my mom at the time didn't have to work, so she'd take us down to the shop and we'd say hi to Dad and look around. And my dad would always give me, the little prototype part or whatever, as long as there's not enough sharp edges to hurt me. And it's kind of cool. I still have some of those parts, and actually more recently we started producing one of those very same parts for one of our clients again.
Oh, nice.
So I remember the first time I saw it, it was a 125. It was a Honda CR125 with a CRG Heron, the old yellow CRGs with at the time it was gearbox bodywork. And, I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. My dad had one. I'm 4. I want one.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in it, and, my ankles went to the tie rods, and I hoped like crazy that those were the pedals, but they weren't. And, probably about 5-6 months later, my dad was able to find a cart that was small enough for me, and that was a CRG Pufo, which is, right below a baby cart. So instead of at the time a baby was a Comer C50, this was some 35cc engine off of like a chainsaw or something.
So that would have been smaller than a kid cart.
Yeah.
Right? Smaller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Smaller.
So, I remember Dad brought it home, driving around in the front yard, and because my dad is, of course, at the time, he was a big Dale Earnhardt fan, and gives me an open-face helmet and a pair of Scott goggles, driving around in front of the house, the cul-de-sac there. And what people don't tell kids when they watch their parents drive is that power steering is notably different than steering with a steering column and tie rods.
I will agree that parents aren't telling their kids that.
And you gotta have
crazy, but I would agree with you.
You gotta have the talk, because if you don't,
skip birds and the bees. Just
exactly
focus on that.
straight to straight to steering.
5 bloody years old, mate.
I hope you're skipping that. Yeah.
So in my
Ryan never got that talk to this day.
in my
He doesn't get a lot of talks, actually.
yeah.
We just talked about it earlier. He figured it out on his own.
Yeah, it's true.
I certainly did, and the way I figured that out was.
We're still talking about karting, right?
Yeah, we're talking about karting. So I'm 4.5 years old, 4 years old, driving around in front of my house.
Yeah.
And I need to turn some more, so I'm like, well, we're just going to go ahead and give it a little more steering. But we had already maxed out, and I didn't understand, because whenever I watch my parents drive around, or they put me on their lap to drive home or whatever,
Yeah.
you can turn the steering wheel a bunch of times.
It's got to be the same.
So I went straight into the back of a Chevy Astro van with an open-faced helmet, which is why I'm so attractive now. But
Was the helmet okay?
the helmet didn't even get touched.
Nice. All right. Good.
I just
vintage.
saved it
I
with
just
his
basically ate the steel rear bumper of an Astro van as my
Man.
welcome to karting.
Man.
And hopped out of the cart, ran inside, grabbed a washcloth, wiped all the blood off my face.
Yeah, you
Get
did
back
that.
after it.
I'm sure there was some kind of adult involved in that one.
Well, I remember
Insurance had to be taken.
Nice.
Personal
Did
info.
you sign the waiver?
I remember running in the kitchen, and my mom was standing there and she sees all the blood on my face and was like, what's going on?
So was your dad out there with you, or
My dad was out. Yeah, no, my dad was
Oh,
out there.
he pull started. He ascended. You're good.
Yeah.
I'll see you in 10 minutes on the tank.
Yeah, it was
runs
direct
out.
drive. Just at 4 years old. No.
Choke it.
Yeah,
Get nice.
no. Got back out there, and that was when I had the talk of you can't turn past here because it stops.
Right.
And that always sticks with me to this day.
Man.
Fundamentals.
But
So that's kind of simultaneously how Two Wild gets started and how you see a go-kart for the first time.
yep.
Obviously, your first opportunity in a go-kart went swimmingly.
Oh, fabulous.
So I think there's probably some incentive right out of the gate to maybe get to a racetrack.
Yeah, so the first track we went to was actually Imago. It was run by, I don't know if either of you remember the name, Peter Kudlupski. He was actually Two Wild's first dealer for Cosmics when we became the Cosmic distributor.
Sorry, and is the business happening at the manufacturing place, or did
Yes.
you?
So we had about a 30,000 square foot facility, and there was an extra room that we had that was originally set aside for QC, and the QC department was moved into another area. So that kind of like little workshop area was set up to be kind of a storefront for the karting stuff.
Got it. Okay. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah. So no, the first track I went to was Imago. I remember the first time we were out there, I was just bummed because they wouldn't let me on the big track. They had a little tiny little track that was just some painted lines on the other end of the parking lot. And
And this is still 5-year-old Ryan.
oh no,
Or
I'm still 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Eventually, I mean,
Benjamin Button over here, not aging. Jesus.
so I remember. I mean, we did a bunch of just little practice days. Eventually, got to go on the big track, and I don't really know how it happened, but I remember one night my dad's like, "Hey, there's a race. Do you think you'd want to try a race?"
Is kit karting a thing?
So this was
90s?
really early, kind of kid karts. I mean, I feel like, me and not long after this did I meet Cameron.
When I know, and when we had his episode and talked to him, it was cadets. He did straight into cadets. So there was no kid kart thing.
There was definitely a kid kart.
Oh no,
I've got
he had the
I've got
kid
pictures
kart race
of him.
at the Angel
Oh,
Stadium.
I'm sorry. That's true.
Yeah.
He said in 98 and 99, he did kid karts for 2. Well, yeah.
But
I
it was
I wasn't
definitely-
even there for that episode.
Yeah, because there was a short period that we were selling MBA carts before we switched over to Cosmics, and I remember we had sold one of those to Cameron and Taylor. So that was kind of our introduction
You know
to
what?
them.
Golly, I should have listened to that episode first because I think he said the first cart
That's right.
was from Too Wild.
Yeah.
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 And yeah. So in 97,
Yep.
right, you're actually getting one of the first. So kit karting's just starting then.
Yeah.
And Cameron immediately showed everybody how it's done by flipping twice in the Momo deal.
I don't
Well, it was
remember.
a
So I
test
don't
on the
remember
chassis,
if that was Momo or there was another series kind of around the same time.
Did he
called-
flip in other series too?
I don't know, but I remember there was
That's awesome because he didn't leave.
because there was another
leave that
race over at the Tustin Air Base, which was called Tustin Thunder.
Oh.
And my memory's not great on it, but I think I remember Cameron being there because I remember Cameron was there for sure, as was Connor DeFelipe.
Are you, which he had mentioned he's raced
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
You are older than about the same as Cam?
Yeah, so I think I'm a
you're a
year
year
older.
older.
You're
Yeah.
older. And Dirk, you're actually a year younger than Cam?
Yeah.
Just to get me in the right frame of mind of where you guys are
And
all
you're
hanging
about
out.
how much older?
Yeah, okay. So
I'm just
you're
trying to keep
doing the
track.
kid kart thing.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever race? I mean, you said that
No,
he was
my
in
dad.
the bikes
so,
thing, and then
so he got into karting because he wanted something he could do. My dad has owned one go-kart.
does he still have it? Still drive it?
No.
Made a killing off it last week.
Because I remember I think it was actually my second race I'd ever done. Asking my dad, well, when are you going to race? And I remember him just saying, well, he's like, you're my priority. He's like, if I race, he's like, I don't want you to feel like I can't help you. And, I've got to have a lot of respect for that. I mean,
So because he did out of the
Yeah.
gate, it was about him doing 4 wheels instead of 2, and
Yeah.
being able to go to work on Monday and so on and so forth. Now he did it with his business partners and friends. Did they all get go karts?
so this is where the story takes a notably darker turn. That business my dad was running with his college buddy, or not college buddy, with his high school friend. He'd known him his whole life. They'd grown up together. Families were, mutual friends. It wound up getting to the point where, paychecks stopped showing up. Money starts getting tight around the house. My mom's asking, well, what's going on? The way the company was set up, my dad's high school friend was the one who's in charge of all the money. He was the one who's, the finance guy. My dad was in charge of, making the parts happen. He does, the programming of the CNC machines. He, works with the customers on trying to make sure that whatever their idea was or whatever they're after is possible, and then, he gets it done. The other one was actually he who shall remain nameless's uncle, and he was kind of the logistics guy. So as soon as the parts were done, goes off to him. He handles making sure payments show up, or parts go out, or if they're making a complete assembly, they would go ahead and make sure all the hardware, the bill of materials, everything was there to execute. So paychecks stop showing up, things start getting tight, and it kind of comes to light that he was, embezzling money. Well, where he was embezzling the money from was the big no-no. If you're going to steal from yourself, not the government.
Nice.
So it turns out the entirety of the 8 years that they were, building this business from, just something they were doing on the night after they were done at their other jobs.
Start off as a side project, yeah.
Yeah, it started off as a side project to the point where they were buying a 30,000 square foot building in Rancho Santa Margarita. They had, I think, 35 or 40 employees at that point. They had their own line of other products. I mean, it really took off.
Yeah, it grew massively.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact revenue figures, but I think it was, just shy of 10 million a year in sales and on a good trajectory.
Rolling. However, a little odd when the paycheck stopped showing up, eh?
Yeah, paycheck stopped showing up. Turns out, the money he was embezzling was all of the payroll taxes because he wasn't using a payroll service. He was doing it all himself, and all that money was getting skimmed. We don't know exactly where it went to this day, but we know as soon as the IRS showed up, all of his assets, everything were all moved out of his name. And, we still haven't seen him since then. We know he's somewhere in Texas. He skipped town.
So it's no bueno for the Beachners on
No.
that front. And certainly a young Ryan's racing career that's just blossoming in kid karts here, or trying to.
Yeah.
You're going to move him to a full face helmet, And
Exactly.
And where are we going to get the money for that?
Exactly. No, so, I mean, it went from...
Never mind the new go-karts he's going to wad up on a regular.
Oh, jeez.
That's one thing I'd say I'm pretty proud of is I really have always been good at not crashing.
Well, you did it first, right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I got it right out of my
You
system.
knew what it was like.
Yeah,
We're
no,
gonna go ahead and not do that again.
Exactly. I'm like, you know what? My research, this is not the business.
My research.
Yeah.
I did a little R&D on that.
Yeah, a little bit of, university-backed double blind here.
All right, so as you say, darker turn, whatnot. So maybe his friends did not get the go-karts.
Yeah.
All right, so your dad says, I'm not going to get the go-kart. I'm not going to do the racing myself. I'm going to have Munchkin Ryan get after it, make things happen. So you're racing.
Yeah, so we start racing. At the time, we actually had hired Doug Fleming, who brought along Colin, his son, who later went on to be
That's a name we've heard so much throughout these episodes, man.
Indeed.
Just,
Really?
Yeah, Doug and Colin.
Yeah, you would know if you listened to an episode.
That's another guest
I'm a very busy man. Mike. No.
And to
Fighting
be fair,
COVID.
Yeah,
it's actually...
I'm trying to save the world, Mike.
Yeah, you guys...
Too old, it's child's play now.
It's a podcast. Nobody
Yeah.
can see it, but Derek's like kung fu fighting right over here with the COVID. Yeah. Anyways.
Try to keep the Rona off me.
Exactly.
Anyways.
So my dad had brought Doug in to do engines, and obviously sponsored Colin to help out with their racing. Had a lot of success with them. Colin and Doug actually did a lot of coaching and a lot of work with me. Obviously, working.
What was the age difference?
So
Colin.
there was 7-year difference. So I remember I was 7 when I was working with Colin, and he was 14.
Right. So he's not quite or right approaching. Well, God, at that point, he's
He was
Red Bull
going
driver search, right?
So it was right. It was kind of right before then.
Yeah.
And then when all of the the bankruptcy and the blowout with the business and all of that happened, was kind of right as he went off to do the driver search.
Gotcha. But I mean, shit, you got a chance to listen and learn from somebody who had gone through a bunch of different things too, with the driver search start and all this other kind of stuff. So never mind, he's a pretty damn good wheelman.
Yeah.
But also, Doug is halfway decent in the power plant department.
Oh, I mean, I have a ton of respect for Doug. I mean, Doug was kind of my karting grandpa growing up. We would go to the track. My dad's, busy at work, whatever it is. Well, I'd go to the track with Doug and Colin would do a little bit of coaching with me or whatever it is. And, even if Colin was out of town, I'd go and sleep over at Doug's house. And, the next morning, wake up bright and early, head up to Willow and, go do laps all day long.
So you get into the kid kart game, like 97 or whatever, and you start going racing. And it sounds like from the Cameron episode, etc., there was some races to do.
Yeah.
And some, whether it be club racing or otherwise for kid karts.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was LAKC, obviously, Tri-C, SoCal Sprinters. At the time, there was also, I think it was Gold Coast Karters, which was up at Willow Springs.
So it was Adams, Willow, and what was the other track that people were?
Well, you had said you'd started at Saugus.
Yeah. So,
or, excuse me, no,
so
Imago. Or,
well, okay, so the first track I ever drove was Imago.
Okay.
The first race I did was actually the first time I ever saw the track in Saugus. And I think I only did maybe 3 races over there before Saugus wound up getting shut down.
Oh, gotcha. And you said that was at LAKC.
Yeah, that was LAKC. I still have the trophy.
Nice.
That's one of them that I've kept on to.
It's next to the helmet.
Oh, it's cool.
Facebook, right?
I've got a nice little IKEA rack of my different helmets I've had throughout the
Spared
years.
no expense.
Yeah, it was a whole $60.
So you're doing the your first deal is at Imago.
Yep.
Right. You do the Saugus deal with LAKC. Sounds like maybe towards the end of that particular season, and then you kick into the next year. You're not running at Saugus. You're going.
So it's hard for me to kind of break it up because I mean at this time I don't really have any concept of a championship or points or anything like that. I'm simple-minded, 5-year-old.
You're going to drive.
I'm having a good time. I'm
Gotcha.
driving go-karts. This is badass.
Gotcha. So you're driving go-karts. You're
Yeah.
having some fun, doing all this other kind of stuff. You get in. I assume you roll right into cadets in a couple of years. When does so you say you didn't have a concept of points championship? When does that start coming around?
So where I think when I first became aware of the more kind of longer term strategic side of racing with points and things like that was probably by about age 8 or 9. So when I moved into cadets from kid karts, it was the days of IKF when we would race the Comer K80s, in a choke down version of an HPV, which was HPV 1. Then there was a Yamaha, and then so I did those 3 classes a weekend. And then when I turned 9, we added a shifter. So there was it was a KX65 onto a cadet chassis.
That was when the shifter started coming around with the 60cc shifter, the 80cc shifter, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. So that was when we started. I mean, I remember having conversations on the ride home with my dad about, we gotta make sure we finish ahead of so and so because of points, and I started to kind of grasp those concepts.
Do you think it was a lot of you keeping track, or was your dad kind of just wanting you to show up and have fun, or was he just as competitive?
So cadets was kind of a hard time for me. It was one of those things where I really liked it, and I mean I always enjoyed what I was doing, but I was kind of getting burnt out. I mean, you race 4 classes a weekend.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot for anybody.
It sounds like there's a lot of racing back then too, as far as weekends go. Talking to some of the other guests we've had,
Yeah.
You're not just doing once a month, right? There's a lot of different racing to be going on.
Yeah, so a lot of it early on was really dictated by my performance at school. I mean, racing, and I feel like if anybody who's grown up in racing has had that same thing of, if you don't perform in the classroom, you don't go on track.
100%. Actually, yeah, it happened to me as a kid. Yeah, I was 12 years old, was going racing, and I hated school. And as we all know, the racing season and the school season are 2 different seasons, right?
Yep.
So you start end of one year, and we're getting down to the end of the year, and my dad and my parents are like, you need to do something about these grades, mate, or else you're going to, we're going to take you out.
Yeah.
And they kept me in through the summer, and, well, the new season starts, or the new school season starts up, if you will, and my dad didn't have the heart to pull me, and said, "Well, you can keep track," because we were also doing pretty good in the points and stuff like that. But at the end of the year, man, I just didn't get it, and they pulled me. It was tough, but that's the way it should be.
Oh, I remember the most. I mean, obviously, it sucked when it happened really bad, and I did not understand. But now, like looking back on it as an adult, it's easily the most badass dad move my dad ever did on me. Was I came home and I had a C in one of my classes, and
to have a C,
and he was, oh no, and I'm not good at school. I haven't been for a long time,
That's why you stopped.
Finally had a chance to get out.
Exactly. Pull the chute. No. I had a C, and he's like, well, what's that mean? I'm like, C's average. That's fine, right? He's like, average kids don't go racing. And I'm like,
You did what?
exactly. So, I mean, I was pretty upset about it because, you know, it's what I did. That was my identity.
Do you remember how old you were at this time?
I don't. I think it was
Like middle school?
no, it was elementary school still.
Okay.
Probably cadets, I would think.
But here's where it got really just power move dad style was. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to the race. Well, better do whatever I can to make the best of the time. I'm not at the track then. Oh no. 5:30 in the morning, my light turns on. Come on, we're going to the track. I thought I wasn't racing. You're not. Doesn't mean you're not going.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Rod Beachner, everybody.
Yeah, from the top rope.
Pulled the old Texas switch on you.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I got to the track, everybody's like, well, how come you aren't racing? I got a C.
Wow. You're right. Power move.
Yeah, no, that's like right on the cusp of just peak parenting, in my opinion.
Man. Does he still do that now? Does he look at your bottom line with Too Wild and be like, what are you doing?
So
How would you
I've
strut him in front of all the other business owners he knows?
We're still going to the track.
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because there's actually been times recently because you know one of the big things I worked on recently was purchasing the company that my dad had worked to start and was then an employee of after the collapse of the first business. So my dad got screwed, lost his retirement, and it just wasn't good. So when I got to the end of high school and everybody's like, what do you want to do with your life? I wasn't like, yeah, I want to own a go-kart shop.
Right.
It was, I didn't know what I was good at. And I didn't know, like, I love engineering. I love technical stuff. I'm not an engineer. I'm terrible at math. The classes I took in high school weren't even good enough to get, like, I did not take trig. I didn't take any of that stuff. Like, I took Algebra 1 as 2 classes.
Ryan sounds
You
like
took
me.
the stuff to just graduate. That was my whole thing.
Absolutely.
Did you do like, you know how you had you could do electives? They gave you like half credit for a particular like math or science. Did you do that too? That's how I was able to try to do it.
So
because you would do like manufacturing or like construction, they would give you a half credit math. So I would the highest I did was algebra because I got all my other credits through electives.
So when I was in high school,
don't do that, kids. That's actually a bad idea.
Well,
no,
I don't
my
think they have
advice
construction anymore in most schools. So.
And my advice on high school and college is probably not a friendly message. I just another topic, but
we must press on.
Yeah, for me in high school, I kind of took the required classes, and then high school was kind of when my enthusiasm for karting really kind of came back, and I was excited about it, and I started getting more results, and things were moving along. Well, I started to have more opportunity to travel with my racing and stuff like that.
Hold on, and I totally derailed this, so it's my fault.
Yeah.
But because that sounds like more karting stuff. Let's go back to your pops real quick. You had said that you were like, your dad gets screwed, or whatever, and you were doing this business thing, and you were starting to talk about like buying the business and whatnot.
Yeah. So
maybe finish that point.
Yeah.
So before I mess it up.
So, my dad came home from work. It was, I think, call it 3 years ago now, and says, I've got to find a job. And I'm looking at him like, nah, that's just not how that works. And
you're like, you don't have any spots at Too Wild. There's no availability.
I was just like, I can't afford what you make. Like, this is, I love you dearly, but I don't want you around that much. So I asked him, I'm like, well, from the outset, you were supposed to be one of the owners of this business. And when he was supposed to take over half the ownership, Instead, he got a pay raise and now you can buy half. And it was kind of well, you signed my paychecks. You know how much money I don't have. How am I going to do this? So I had asked my dad, I'm like, if I can find the money to buy the place, can we buy the place? And I think he kind of knew that I wasn't really going to take no for an answer. And simultaneously, I don't think he had a whole hell of a lot of options.
Right.
My dad is 58, so at the time he was 56. At 56, when you've always been in a position where you're relatively autonomous in your work, you more or less run the company. That's not the type of person who just walks upstairs, hops on the computer, and taps out a resume, and then goes out and pounds some pavement and gets a job. So it took me about a year and a half to finally get somebody who was interested in hearing me out about buying the family manufacturing business, and I had to go through drafting all the agreements and making sure dotting T's, crossing I's, forming corporations, going through it. So now we're technically partners on that. I'd love to say I'm a bigger part of it than I am, but that's his thing. I've grown up in motorsports. It's motorsports. Is anybody getting rich in this industry? No.
Kind of sounds like the things that you've learned along the way or whatnot, though, you've definitely been able to give back.
Yes.
To your dad.
There's been a number of times where my dad has some sort of problem and he starts venting to me, and I'm just like, oh my God, really? How do you not know this? Like, I've dealt with this. And there's just a lot of parts of that business that he wasn't hands-on with. And from having to run Too Wild, there's not a single part of that business that I wasn't hands-on with. So, provides a little bit different perspective. Obviously, I'm also younger. So that, there's a lot of youthful naivety in there. And a certain amount of it is, we were approached with a job that was kind of outside the scope of work that we do. And, I'll run at it. I'll make a fool of myself. I don't care. I'm not afraid of greatness.
But so basically what we've got is somebody that doesn't like school, wasn't good at school, etc. And at the end of the day, what really we're talking about is somebody you've learned what you know, and what you know is learned by doing.
Yeah.
And there's the
most valuable thing I think I've learned in life is that there's really nothing that you are incapable of doing. It's a matter of being willing to learn and having access to the tools. I mean, I remember when I got my first car. So I go to start it and doesn't start. Well, what the hell? It cranks, but nothing happens. I'm on the gas station at the corner and call my dad one night thinking, okay, well, my dad knows a lot about this stuff.
Yeah.
No, my dad is not an auto mechanic.
I got a good number of AAA that probably help.
And all he said was, oh, that sucks. Well, maybe check the fuses. A solid suggestion. Was not the fuses. Turns out the fuel pump was bad. So I had to get a tow truck for the half a block I had to get it home.
Oof.
And then I remember asking him for help, and he was there. It was outside what he does.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I was a broke teenager who now needed to repair a BMW. So what do broke teenagers do? They get on the internet.
Oh, that's nice to have at that time.
Yeah, no, I would be a complete failure without the internet.
So obviously you have not a smooth sailing ride to kart shop ownership and all the other things. Pretty damn cool to hear about all the different things you did leading up to all that kind of stuff, helping out your dad and everything like that. Let's go back into the karting a little bit and talk about, okay, so the cadets, you're starting to get a little bit better in the cadets game.
Yeah, so in cadets, it was, I remember we did IKF, and then we would do one club race. So there was some years we did IKF with SDKA, which was down in San Diego, either Old El Cajon or,
Did it at the stadium or whatever?
That's old Qualcomm. That would be SDK.
Okay.
San Diego.
Well, this was SDKA, but it was before they went to Qualcomm.
Gotcha.
Oh, but that would be the stadium you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it a stadium.
It's what he means.
Okay, yeah. Stadium would be a
overthink it,
lofty
right?
way to describe what El Cajon was.
Oh, okay.
So no, we did that, or SCUSA Mission Region, because early on I really preferred the shifter compared to the other stuff, partially because I was a fat kid, and the weight and shifter was higher, so the difference between me and other kids was not as much.
You did that math pretty easily, though. You're like, this is the way to go.
Exactly. So no, I mean, cadets, I loved the shifter, but the other stuff I was just burnt out on. I mean, when me and Cameron were racing cadets, the amount of money that was, and to this day there's still people spending stupid money, but the amount of money that was being spent, like there was probably 5 or 6 kids that would show up with a full Renegade RV setup, big rolling snap-on NASCAR war wagons type setups, awnings off the thing for 2 go-karts. And those people would basically, hire the engine builders as mechanics. And, as kids, we always hoped that it was a fair competition, but, we eventually learned that the Comer K80s were an absolute shit show. I mean, the parity between one engine to the next, I'll never forget. Me and Cameron always struggled in cadets until there was one race at Buttonwillow where Cameron's motors had blown up.
I think he told us the story. He
Okay.
borrowed somebody else's.
Yeah, he borrowed an engine.
Someone's like 3rd-tier motor on the shelf.
Yeah, and another rod to the rescue story. I believe my dad actually went over and grabbed that engine because it was an old customer of ours. So yeah, the 3rd-tier engine out of somebody else's trailer. And Cameron, who, me and Cameron were, upper mid-pack, and Cameron throws it on pole. And I remember I came in from that
Hey,
side.
Dad, why not me?
I was just about to say that, yeah.
So, well, no,
Put it on the wrong go-kart.
He's like, he's the customer. That's why.
So okay, it's funny. I do have to address that because there's a lot of people growing up who were convinced that he's the shop kid. He gets special stuff.
It was the opposite.
Oh, it's the opposite. It's
That sounds like Rod, though. The little bit I know about Rod.
Yeah, no, there was nothing special. Like my kid karts were hilarious. So I did well in kid karts. Look at me go.
Still waiting to cash those checks from there.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, I was going to write a book exclusively on that. No, but I remember it was probably after we started racing, maybe 2 months in, my dad comes home. I had just got home from school, and he's like, I sold your go-kart. And I was just distraught. I'm like, why? What did I do wrong? He's like, oh, no, it's fine. You'll have another one next week. Oh, okay.
You being a kid, not knowing how it works.
Yeah, like I thought it was a punishment, but then he's like, no, it's business. So
Well, and as a munchkin, too, I've seen some of these kids get like really attached to the go-kart.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's my go-kart. They don't yet realize that.
Yeah, it's funny because so being like in that headspace from that age, I've never understood like growing up when everybody got their first car. Everybody who like romanticizes, I got a Honda Civic and I named it Charles or whatever it is, and they're like,
Nobody names their car Charles.
No, I know.
I've never gotten. I know a few of my buddies that have named their cars. I'm like, I've never gotten in that. Like, what's the car for your name? Name for your car? I'm like, I don't know. Shit.
Yeah,
It's Civic. All right. It runs.
if it doesn't start, it's bastard.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, and it's like I've always just looked at all of that as it's a tool for a job, and if you're gonna get overly attached to it, it's just a disadvantage. So
That's a good way to put it.
So you're pretty damn good at kid karts. You get to cadets. You like shifters. You're having a bit of a tough time, maybe mid-pack or whatever. And then we had this incident where your friend, whatnot, eclipses.
And as kids, you kind of, it's kind of a depressing process to be a mid-pack kid in cadets, and then have that happen where it's like, well, wait a minute, this is all BS.
Right. Starting to put two and two together.
And thankfully, I never really thought of it that way. I just thought, I've just got to drive better. I mean, if I ever came in and blamed my engine, my dad would tear me a new one. I mean, it's just not something you did. I mean, yeah, so when we got into karting, we were very well to do. We had money, we had all this stuff. But, most of the time I spent racing was after the bankruptcy. So, I mean, early on, we went from, multiple vacations a year and it's fantastic. We're, the picture of upper middle class America to, I mean, I'll never forget the ride home from school and my mom just breaking out in tears when I asked for some food because she then had to explain we didn't have any money. I mean, there was a short period where the only reason we had money for groceries was because one of the local churches was donating gift cards. I mean, my mom had to take me and my sister to a courthouse to basically beg the judge not to take the house from us. I mean, all the cars, auditors from the IRS showed up.
And were you guys karting? So
I was racing before and after that.
Gotcha.
And
how does that work? Obviously, because this is an expense you don't believe sometimes.
Thankfully, my dad had enough customers that we could offset it to where it was fine. I mean,
the customer money was enough to let you go racing, and that's about it.
And there was, I didn't learn about this until much later, but there was some other people from within the industry that knew what was going on that were helping my dad out.
And at the end of the day, he was trying to keep the kid in the game.
And
not
that was,
sacrifice
that was me and my dad's thing. And, financially, was it the right move? God, no. For my relationship with my dad, was it the right thing to do? Yeah. I mean, he made a lot of sacrifices, and I can't thank him enough for that.
How long did that go on for, the financial burden, if you will?
We were basically broke until I remember until I was probably a sophomore in high school, we didn't get clear of the IRS.
Oh, wow.
They were after us.
God, we're talking 7-ish years, but
yeah. So from the time I was about 8, 9-ish, because I remember that all happened when I was getting out of first grade. And then by the time I was sophomore, junior in high school was when I remember we finally. So after the bankruptcy, we wound up having to refi the house, pay off the IRS, and that was all the equity from the house.
Right.
So it's like financially, it's game over. And the worst part about all of it was I remember anytime my mom needed a new car or whatever it was, you can't get financing. Nobody will give you a credit card. I mean,
yeah, I've lived that one.
Yeah, exactly. It's horrible. So, I mean, I've got, the utmost appreciation for the, the sacrifices he didn't have to make, but he did.
So, obviously tough times all the way through.
Yep.
The cadet stuff,
mm-hmm.
the thing happens with Cameron. You're like, hey, I need to drive better, etc.
Yeah.
And
so
then
it was
move
always
on to juniors. When's the upside start to happen here in the karting career, bud?
So high school, really. In cadets, there was times where we're doing a lot of racing, and it was always stressful, and I guess I never really understood it at the time because I wasn't completely aware of what was going on with my dad's life. I mean, shit, if I was going through that and I had kids and I had no idea how the hell I would navigate that.
Strong people, man.
Yeah. And, cadets, I was starting to get to a point where I was burnt out. I started to realize, things weren't, the parity in some of these classes wasn't that good. So, when times got tough, we stopped racing the classes that we weren't good at. So, we said no more Comer 80s.
And at the most, you were doing 4 classes,
We were doing 4 classes a weekend at one point. Yeah.
Well, and I suppose the classes you're not doing well at and the ones you're not having as much fun at.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Shifter stuck around.
Yeah, no, Shifter stuck around, and then the HPV, which is now KPV. I always loved that one. I'll never forget the first time I drove the Yamaha. It was at Adams Kart Track. I go out, and I had always seen Colin drive the Yamahas. I'd seen all the other guys, and I was thought, this is going to be badass. And I go out on track, and it makes that traditional Yamaha noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, and I remember doing like 3 laps and then coming in and being like, Dad, I don't get it. Well, what do you mean? Everything looks fine. It makes a ton of noise, but it doesn't go anywhere. So my stint in Yamaha was short-lived, thankfully.
About 1 day or so.
And no, I mean, I
3
did,
laps, it sounds like.
Yeah.
no, I think I raced it for probably about 2 years.
I'm sure a lot of guys were doing it back then too.
Well,
Yeah, no.
yeah, it was like one of the primary
Right.
deals.
No,
Sportsmen and whatnot.
Yeah, one thing that a lot of parents take for granted about, call it modern karting nowadays is if you want to race a bunch of classes, it's not like you show up at a racetrack now and you're like, I'm going to race Mini Rock today. I'm going to race Mini Swift today. I'm going to go ahead and race Briggs today. Those are their own events. So we can all complain about the lack of uniformity, but there's arguably more uniformity in the industry now than there's ever been. So,
To your point, just the sheer number of options.
yeah.
Back in the day, in the 90s and early 2000s.
And
now it's streamlined, if you will.
Well, and up until the financial collapse with the housing market, I mean, there was big fields. I mean, I remember IKF races where there'd be 45 cadets.
Man.
And then the one cadet class that was, more lightly attended would have 25. I mean, now that's a solid field for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were talking to Cameron, he was talking about the different things that he was running.
Yeah.
And those huge ass fields.
Yep.
And then Shifter was like 15 or so.
Yeah, Shifter was always
it's
smaller.
The best 15 drivers you're going to find
Right.
from
He
these
said
cadet
it
drivers.
was typically the right drivers that were doing the cadet
Yeah,
shifter.
shifters, I remember. So I raced with, I remember Joey Barros did the shifters about the same time. Connor DeFelipe did them as well. Cole Witt was racing those.
Oh, wow, that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
I missed it, but if you guys know Gustavo Menezes, he raced the shifters as well. Yeah, I mean, a ton of names I could list off, but
And you're
people
still
probably
wheel to
wouldn't know
wheel,
it's
and Cameron's running with you as well?
So Cameron, yeah. Oh, yeah, because I remember there was the shifter that Cameron's dad built. Like Cameron's first step into a shifter, I remember, was kind of just drive that.
Yeah, I remember like a picture. It's like gray or silver bodywork. It's got 2 wild
It
sticks.
was a Cosmic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like it's all flashy dashy. It's
No, so you have to remember. So back when me and Cameron were in cadets, it was kind of before graphics kits were things for karts.
shit. You guys at least had plastics.
Yeah. No, we had plastics, we had that stuff, but if you want to be real Gucci, you had like a Micron sticker. Micron 2.
But he
Got away from those Digitrons.
There was there's probably the two cadet shifter chassis, or he said I think a top cart. Top cart.
Oh,
was
that's
making
right. He
one.
said you had to like modify the chassis
you would have to
make
go
it a shifter
make
one.
your own
Yeah,
to
so
do
it was funny. I actually ran across somebody on Facebook recently who I think the dude was he said he was like 6 foot and he was driving one of the old, so CRG, an SSC to their credit was one of the people who really pushed that package. And CRG had a cadet shifter package, which would come with the shift linkage welded to it. However, all the Cosmics, the Top Karts, the Burrells, all of those, you had to weld the linkage on. There was no way around it. They weren't meant for it. And this was also kind of back in the day when it wasn't like it is today, where I feel like the equipment means more now than it did then. And a lot of the trends in who was racing what had more to do with, just what you happen to be racing. There was an absolute ton of Top Kart stuff. With PKS, Glenaraki was big. Empire Karts with the Barros family, they sold a lot of stuff. And the Top Karts, were real popular for the cadet stuff.
And I remember Travis actually saying Top Kart was a big deal back then too.
Yes, no, yeah. Travis was one of the big guys behind Top Kart. With I think it was CGT or whatever, his family's trucking business had sponsored it, and Top Kart then was kind of like, Freeline Burrell is now in terms of size.
Gotcha.
And then, Burrell at the time was, Burrell came to power right after Top Kart, and then CRG kind of came up through it, and then probably about 09 is when OTK began their reign of terror, and now everything's kind of started leveling back out again.
Seems like that.
So you get into the shifter game as a cadet.
Yeah.
You keep doing shifters through juniors.
So,
and then you had talked about how things really started to take off in high school.
Yeah, so I really didn't do much for juniors. I went from cadets because basically when I was going to move out of cadets and into juniors, I was 12 when I got put into tag senior.
How is that possible,
Well, it's because
Ryan?
your size. You
No,
mentioned you're a
okay,
big
so
kid.
Well, it's
No,
still a
it's-
12. That's like 3 years early.
So
2 by today's standards.
yeah, no, if you looked at any of my entry forms, I was 15 for the better part of 3 years. So that kind of brings
Totally
us...
legit.
Yeah, okay, so where I got reinterested in karting was when I went from cadets and into tag stuff. That was kind of the very beginning of Pro Kart Challenge, before Pro Kart and SCUSA were the same thing. So Pro Kart kind of came into existence when SCUSA was kind of going downhill.
Yeah, I remember I did SCUSA Cascade Region 2006. It wasn't Pro Kart stuff yet.
Correct. So Pro Kart Challenge was, obviously everybody knows Tom. There was another guy, Greg Smith, and one other who I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. But, their whole thing was when SCUSA went downhill, really all there was left was IKF. And IKF didn't really have much to offer anybody who wanted to race anything other than non-shifter stuff. So you had a bunch of people who had shifter karts in their garages who just wanted to get out and race. So the idea, and where it all started was they were going to put on a race. There was no junior classes. There was no cadets. It was going to be senior, masters, and, we'll have tag because it was exciting and new, and, it's faster than those other things. The electric start, it's kind of modern. And the other stuff was going to be either spec Hondas or, at the time it was ICCs. Well, that kind of starts growing, and my dad wanted to, start doing that. We had more and more masters drivers we were supporting, so...
How big was the team at this point, you think? How many drivers do you have under the tent?
And speaking of which, let's nail down, what is this point? What year are we thinking right about?
I think this is what, 2004? Yeah, this is, 04, 05?
So 04, 05, and to Derek's point, how big is Too Wild at this point?
So Pro Kart is really when we started growing again. We never had, all through my cadet years, we never really had a big presence as a team. And the other thing to keep in mind is that at this time, the idea of teams in how they currently exist in karting really didn't happen.
It's more kart shops and then support of their people,
exactly.
right?
So, this was, called up to about, I don't remember really the current team model really happening until 2000.
Fairly recent.
2010?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Before that, if you would have walked into my dad's shop and told him that, you're going to go to these races and charge customers to be under the tent to get whatever, he would have thought you were the biggest asshole in the world.
Yeah, the tent program, if there was one, was kind of you've already bought in by buying the chassis and buying the parts and all that. It was it was a support. It was a bonus.
Yeah, no, and for the longest time, that's, part sales were what the business was.
Right.
You could have a mechanic, you'd pay them obviously, but you weren't paying a team or a shop. If you ran with that shop, if that was who you worked with for whatever, that was the team you were on. But I think at the most we had early days of Pro Kart, I think we had 16 or 18 drivers.
Still pretty big, man.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, that's not under one tent. I mean, that's people who
Right.
Those
right.
those are all.
Those
I mean,
are
that's-
customers.
Those are customers and friends, and
Yeah.
we just happened to all make sure we were always together because that way parts are close by. And
Was this all OTK stuff?
so at the time, we weren't really exclusively OTK until I took over.
Okay.
And even then, I mean, there's, I've got customers from when we sold CRGs that they're just diehard CRG people. There's nothing I'm going to do to convert them. I'll happily get them whatever they need, whether it means I call another dealer who can get it or whatever. I'll make sure they're good. But at the time, we were selling Arrow, we sold Top Kart, and we sold Tony Kart.
This is, again, at 2004-ish.
Yeah. And the other part is, a lot of the other shops back then, it was a little bit more feasible to be able to, support more than one brand because really you're just selling parts and accessories. The onus wasn't really on you to be able to know what you're doing as much as now where a lot of the shops are selling the same things. And the differentiating factor is, number one, who do you get along with and who speaks your language? But also, how familiar are they with the product and do they have it figured out? Do they know what they're doing truly at a, on a performance level? So the industry's changed a lot in that regard.
So back then in 2004, you have customers and whatnot.
Yeah.
The team orientation is not really a thing yet.
Yeah.
And you're going senior racing?
So
Not at all.
So basically,
my
my thing was I was so burnt out on the cadet stuff. My dad was having, we started supporting Pro Kart Challenge, and everybody was just having a good time. I mean, there was no national hot shoes showing up. It was just, in a certain way, it's what karting really is when you distill it past all of the media BS. Even the way the events were structured. I mean, the event was Friday and Saturday, and you weren't allowed to practice the week before because everybody going out there had a job. Everybody had, they didn't race on Sundays because Tom looked at it as, well, if you try and race Saturday, Sunday, then nobody's going to show up because their wife's going to be pissed off at them because they don't have time to fix the sink, or they don't have time to go to church, or they don't have time to do whatever it is. Friday nights there was always a barbecue that was put on by the series, and the atmosphere in those days was really just we're gonna go to the track, we're gonna have a race, have a good time, be with some good people, and when it's over, we're all gonna sit there and tell war stories and bullshit and and come back, do it again next month.
And I suppose the big difference now is that everybody has to work Fridays, and there's no more sinks that need to be fixed.
Exactly. Yeah, no, we've all become professionals. One other thing, I wish they'd bring it back. There was a thing he did called the Dash for Cash.
Oh,
I've heard of this.
Didn't Matty Jace talk about that?
I think so, yeah.
Or was it Travis?
It was
I think
probably
Travis.
Travis. So Travis worked for us around this time.
Oh, really?
So Travis worked for us, and then Connor's dad, Craig, worked for us at the same time. But those two worked for us, right before the real estate collapse. And Travis is another one I've learned a lot from. I've also learned a lot of what not to do from Travis.
I think he'd be the first to admit it as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I talk to Travis pretty routinely now. I mean, I consider Travis the kind of the weird uncle I never wanted, but I'm appreciative to have. So,
Tell us more about the Dash for Cash, though.
okay, so the Dash for Cash was you would go ahead and qualify, and then the top 5 immediately after you clear the scales, you go back out onto the track. You set the karts up on the front straightaway as a Le Mans style start, and then you have a 5-lap race with an inverted start for, I think it was like $1,000.
Wow.
And from how Travis said it, the person who's last every lap is knocked out.
Yes. Yeah. So 5 people start, and then if you're not the leader, yeah. So it was. I mean, it was definitely just the brainchild of everybody sitting around and being like, "Well, what if we did this?"
Yeah.
It was
for
all
sure.
the exchanging war stories.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
but it was a ton of fun, and anybody who got over third walked away with cash. I remember the couple times I was in them, it sounds like a great idea until you actually have to do it, because then you realize how willing to just murder you are
Right.
for $1,000.
Right.
And you're just like, okay, well, wait a minute. How I finish here is actually determining where I'm starting and the prize. And if I screw anything up, I have way less time to make any repairs or whatever it is before the first heat race.
So what?
Oh, right.
What point did this
This
happen
is,
in the
yeah, I was
weekend?
gonna say that's
Sorry.
exactly good question.
Was this Friday night or Friday?
No. This was Saturday. This was
Ooh.
literally like an,
Wait, no, he said, oh, that's good. He said right after qualifying. You
Oh,
clear scales
gotcha.
and quali.
Yeah.
That's a horrible idea.
No, it's fantastic. It's only a horrible idea if you take yourself way too seriously.
Yeah, okay.
I guess then if you're on track, I mean, I would enjoy watching it.
No,
but-
well.
Oh no,
yeah.
that was the funniest part, because it did not matter what the class was
God,
for
that
that
would-
month.
that would-
Everybody is lining the fence for
Yeah.
that.
I was just gonna say.
I mean,
man,
you're-
you're gonna put the tools down, and
You're
we're gonna go see these.
You're gonna
top
go
laps.
watch the gladiators, because it's
And you know what
That's
though?
awesome.
That kind of goes hand in hand. And it's not just that the 5 laps or who it is. It's the money thing that kind of brings out that other thing. Because remember the money races like at Tri-C or even LAKC, and everybody wants to get that cash, but the sidelines.
Yeah.
It is. And
It's
you know
cool.
what's-
the atmosphere is fantastic.
It's cool
On
driving
the-
up and seeing all those people on the fence. It's just
It
packed.
is, and I'll tell you what. Talk about buzz on that pace lap.
Yeah.
You're coming
Man.
up here by the fence. Here at least at Cal Speed anyway. You
sure.
come
Yeah.
here by the fence, and it is full.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it all goes to hell once the green goes
Yeah.
out.
No, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's something that at a Pro Tour level race, you are 100% correct, is a terrible idea. At an LAKC or a Tri-C or something like that, I mean, I think LAKC might be too serious nowadays. But Tri-C, something like that, I think the atmosphere is fine where, people could have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
It was too when we got a chance to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that's a Le Mans style start as well.
That's nuts.
That's
No,
what,
but,
so-
okay, but look at what you're doing.
no, for sure.
At some point, just turn the sprinklers on.
All right, Mo. I happen to know that, like when I moved down here into California, I remember you still doing shifters.
Yep.
And that's ass end of 2011.
Yep.
And I remember you being halfway freaking decent at it. So.
Yep.
However many years ago that is, your age, carry the one, right? So we're talking
Sure.
about late teens, pushing 20.
Yep.
Let's get, you were a solid shifter driver, bro. So how do we get from the didn't really do juniors, I lied all the way through to get to the seniors, and you're doing a little bit of the
Okay,
tag
well, it
stuff.
wasn't necessarily lying.
Okay,
So I guess I
was
never
not the
I
age
never really
that I was.
yeah, I never really explained why I was there. So Pro Kart Challenge did not have any junior classes or whatever. When my dad said, "Hey, I want to come support. We have all these customers. We've already been doing this. I feel bad. I want my kid to come race." And Tom basically just said,
Yeah, he can't actually take you to the track again with you having good grades and not race.
Yeah.
He's already burned that
"Yeah,
card.
burn
man.
that bridge." No, he basically just went to Tom and said, "Listen, I want my kid to drive, but there's obviously no classes." And there was no way in hell Tom was going to add a junior class for another 5 years. But he basically just said, tell the kid to stay out of trouble. He's a decent enough driver. Tom, before Tom was SCUSA and Pro Kart, he owned a shop also.
It's
Extreme Karting,
right?
Yeah. So, and it was funny because a couple of the guys that had actually worked for Tom had worked for us. Shane Shipley.
Oh, that's a name I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah. So, at the time, it's not like Tom and us or anything were at all on any sort of unfriendly terms or whatever. So it was just we want to come out, but, my kid wants to race. So it was, he's a good enough driver, just keep him out of trouble. So my first race...
And certainly at the time, it's not what it is now. Like, it's
Exactly.
not as deep and
Yeah, like I was talking about. It was a much more like, we're doing this because it's fun, because racing's badass, and we want to get away from our jobs. And a lot of the people that I was racing against were our customers. They already knew who I was. They'd seen me drive. They weren't, worried about it. And as long as I wasn't going out and causing crashes and doing dumb BS or drawing attention to myself or whatever, it was fine. And, that's what I did. So in my first race, naturally, I was fighting for third at Granger and wound up going back and forth. Me and Jerry Henderson were fighting for it. And
What class?
tag senior.
Nice.
So Jerry was running senior. It was my first race in senior. So I'm fighting with Jerry, and he kept hitting me at the bottom of the hill for that kind of decreasing radius right hand.
I'd have no idea. I'd never been.
God, you've been down here for how many years?
It's a sad, sad story.
It's
I've
okay.
actually.
So is that track now. Oof. No, but so he kept hitting me at the bottom of the hill, and I'd hit him at the top of the hill. And finally, he punts me wide, and we come back to the top of the hill. So I said, all right, fair is fair. So I plowed him right off the track. So much for not drawing attention to myself, because Jerry was absolutely livid. He was actually one of the owners of the track at the time.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, he was. He was
Yeah.
actually part of how it became
Yeah,
into existence.
so me being told keep my nose clean, keep a low profile, was show up at your first race, fight for a podium, wreck the track owner, and then think everything's going to be A-okay. I'll never forget, Jerry pulls in, gets his cart off the meat wagon, and walks over to me, pulls my visor open, grabs my visor, and starts just screaming at me. I have never seen so many grown men jump to my defense. It was hilarious.
It's never happened since.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Now I'm the one whacking the beehive. Yeah, so anyhow, I raced Pro Kart with Tag Senior stuff until I actually turned 17, 18, I think.
Well, and let's pause on that, because you're talking about going for a podium. So it's almost like cadets, you had fun in the shifters, whatnot, but some of the other classes, a bit of a tough time. We had the Cameron story, whatnot. Juniors, we're not really talking about that whole hell of a lot. And then seniors, hello, we're going for a podium all of a sudden?
Well, so that's when my interest kind of, sprouted again.
Yeah, mine would too if I was going for a podium.
Well, it was funny because I went from racing fields of 40 cars deep, starting mid pack. I'm sorry, go into a pro kart race where there's 20 or 30 guys, and I have better brakes than I've ever used. I have more power than I've ever had, and I have stickier tires than I've ever driven. There's nothing scary about that situation.
Fair.
Everybody else around me is nervous. Well, I've been dealing with that since I was 8 years old.
So what we're talking about is you didn't have a equipment issue.
Yeah, so now all of a sudden I've got great equipment. It wasn't, granted, Tony Kart stuff at the time wasn't in vogue, but it was still great. I mean, the brakes were good, power was good. MG is still a damn good tire to this day. But going from a Cadet where, a lot of people don't really know how far the design on the Cadet chassis has come in recent years. In the past, it was kind of an afterthought. And it was really even worse because in Europe, they don't use the same tire sizes that we do. So until very recently, were there, I think Bennick was, before Bennick, there was, I can't remember. It was the BA1. It was kind of an offshoot of a...
Oh, it's on the tip of my...
Yeah.
Just solo?
No. Anyhow, not important. But, there was that brand, which was kind of the first Cadet brand that really just focused on...
Cadets.
We're doing Cadets, yeah. We're going to make a Cadet that's the best Cadet.
Nitro karts like that too now, right?
Yes. So Bennick and Nitro, really took that ball and ran with it. And then Tony Kart obviously... identified, they were weak in that part of the marketplace. They focused on it, and now it's, it's a fantastic product. For the first time in a long time, can you actually, buy a Cadet and just go race it? In the past, it was, you were doing all sorts of dumb voodoo. The go-karts didn't work how they should. The same logic that would apply to a full-size kart didn't really work, because you were running the wrong tires, you were running the wrong size tires, the front tires were too big, the rear tires were too small. So like everything me and Cameron raced back then was a compromise. So then you move from a kart that's a complete compromise.
Like you said earlier about the equipment makes more of a difference now than it did back then. Because back then,
Back then, everybody was out in left field.
Yeah,
Like-
and now it's like, okay, yeah, people are actually designing this shit for that class.
No, it's almost like, I mean, the best way I can describe it is like, that was all chassis that were all just kind of in beta.
Right.
Now they're actually like consumer products.
Right. We were like a beta for about 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and you know, I don't necessarily blame the manufacturers. I think more of it has to do with the U.S. and their decision to run all 4 front tires for cadets. But that's just the way it's always been. So nobody can really just say, you know, screw it, guys. We're going to go ahead and bring in a different tire size. It'd piss everybody off.
Well, let's circle back.
Anyhow,
circle back. Yeah.
So
you're wrecking Jerry Harrison off the track. Podium. Did you get the podium?
Rest in peace, Jerry. Yeah, I did.
Let's see.
Yeah. So no, I podium my first race. I had a ton of fun. I mean, it was good wheel-to-wheel racing, obviously.
Also front to back racing, it sounds like.
Yep. No, and you know, I had fun. I mean, all the customers we had there, all the other dudes in my class. I mean, I went from being kind of the shop kid that, you know, when we didn't have any other drivers, I was kind of on an island. So if the only other friends or, you know, people that I dealt with were people that were customers and either gone elsewhere or had come back or whatever. So it's like, you know, there was a lot of people that, you know, I kind of felt like I had people I could, you know, BS with at the track, and it was a cool environment because, you know, even though I was so much younger, there was all these people who all of a sudden were like, whoa, okay, he can do this.
Yeah, and I think everybody who's in karting or any kind of motorsports, right, is you gravitate, or I shouldn't say gravitate, but you can recognize success and you can have that shared respect. And hey, yeah, all right, good on you, mate. You know, let's have that convo.
Yeah, so I did the tag stuff until I think 2009. It's probably I did 5 years in tag.
Did you find much success in it?
So I really enjoyed it, and I felt like as I was getting to be really good at it was when it was, well, now you have to go race shifters. I didn't really want to go race a shifter. It was just, you know, that's where all our customers and market was going.
Ironically, because you actually had the most fun in a shifter when you were a kid.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. What circle backs?
Exactly, and yeah, no. So my dad basically just said, well, we need you to race a shifter because most of our customers are racing shifters right now, so that's what you're going to do.
And for the team or for the shop, for the team, whatever, if we can have Ryan on it and Ryan can do well, or at least bring the information back, it's good for the group.
Idea. And it worked out. I mean, a lot of the customers, I mean, when they built me a cart, it was literally the exact same thing we sold to everybody else. And, you know, my first race, I didn't even have that much practice in it. It was kind of a shit show. I was an S2. You know, and I got it together, wound up winning the championship in S2.
Where was it at?
Pro Kart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I won.
What year's that? Sorry.
2010.
I was going to say, I thought it was right around the time I came down here.
Yeah, so I think 2010, I won the S2 championship. I forgot where I wound up in Vegas, but in Vegas I was doing pretty well. And then...
was this an S2?
That was S2.
Okay.
Yeah, so I only had 1 year in S2. But I remember doing real well in S2, qualified well, and then the opening lap, I wound up getting together with Jake French, and he wound up having to start the final from like 20th. I wound up, so if I'm driving and I get into a crash and I can continue, I will continue. It doesn't matter if it's an horrendous mess. Like, so I got in this wreck with Jake French. Not his fault at all, by the way. We'll point that out. Forgot what happened, but somebody got together in front of us, and me and him got collected by it. The axle of the cart was so bent that, I mean, it was hitting the ground every 6 feet. And
man.
I remember going down the back straightaway at every bit of 70-some miles an hour and not being able to see the steering wheel because it was just going back at, like, everything was vibrating so hard. Like, I remember just screaming in my helmet going down because I'm just like, I'm going to keep going until they black flag me.
Off camera, we were joking about your glasses.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
I think we now found out how the site went bye-bye.
Might be it. But I'll never forget that race because me not pulling in got me 10 grid positions
Wow.
over Jake, because our finishing order in the other
The
heats
Oh, the
was
points.
was broadly similar.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I think I started 10th. I think he had to start like 20th. And, that's one thing I've just always been told, if the cart still runs, you don't pull in until they black flag you.
Right.
So, and it was hilarious when we're coming off the track and there was a bunch of people just lining the fence. Being
Did
like,
you actually finish the race?
No, I got black flagged on the white flag lap.
Oh, man.
Because
leader catching it?
I couldn't keep pace. I mean, the axle was 40 to 50 millimeters a run out vertically. I mean, it was damn near hitting the bumper and the side pod, every time it went by.
Yeah.
And, everybody had passed me. It was just a matter of, in a race like that, I knew other people weren't going to finish. There was going to be people who either pulled off, got pissed off, crashed, couldn't continue, whatever it was. And I'm just like, well, I'll beat all the people who don't finish. And, those free extra positions are what really helped me out later in that. But yeah, coming back into the pits, there's people like, I have no idea how the hell you drove that thing. They're like, yeah, every time you came by, we're just like, oh, look at that guy. How the hell did he do that? So, I mean, it was kind of fun in that respect.
So you end up doing you win the championship at Pro
Yep.
Kart. This is a California Pro Kart at the time.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, did they still have the north-south and all that kind of stuff at the time?
Yeah.
And did you do the north-south challenge?
Yeah.
And how'd that go?
I don't remember.
This is just me, because it popped in my head. I was wondering if...
So, I mean, generally speaking, I've always done well at Buttonwillow. It's just a track I like. It's got a good rhythm to it, and I've, always been pretty good at making the cart work there. Always towards the sharp end of the field, but I know I didn't win it, but I was up there. I mean, my first year in S1, the big challenge was really, it wasn't necessarily just having the pace. It was, let me rephrase, it wasn't pace. It wasn't outright speed. It was the pace. So going from S2 to S1, S2, yeah, I could throw down the same lap times as an S1 driver, but when I went into S1, you've got to be able to throw those lap times down every single time. Like, if you're not going forward.
Right.
And the difference between, somebody, first and second are so damn close that, you make one mistake and you spend the rest of the race paying for it. And that really, really made me work on, that was when I probably started just going to the track. I'd take my dad's truck, throw my cart in it, and then, come out here, go to Adams, wherever it was, and just do, 120-ish laps a day.
That's 2011, where you've done S2 in 2010.
Yeah, so 2011.
So 2011, now you're just...
Yeah, I raced S1 from 2011 to 15, or through 15.
Wow, was that long?
Yeah.
Wow. What are some of the names you remember racing against in S1?
Did you keep doing Supernats all those years too?
Yeah. So in that time, it might have been 2012 I went to S1. Because I remember there was 2 years that instead of racing tag, I raced KF when they had that there.
Oh.
And that was eye-opening.
That's obviously the European class.
So yeah, so now it's called OK.
Yeah.
Formula That'll Do. Horrible name. Yeah, so it might have been 2012 when I went to S1. But no, I mean, the hard part with locally, S1 was a class that there wasn't... I mean, I can't fault SCUSA for it because they did try and keep S1 to be, pretty exclusive. You have to earn your way in. But what kind of sucked about it was there wasn't that many people who were actually allowed to race it. So it's like, it always makes me kind of, uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong, I love compliments and all that. But, when people are like, oh, yeah, you kicked ass. And it's like, well, yeah, but I never felt like there was that many, like the class was never that stacked. And I felt like that's...
Unless you go to these bigger...
Yeah, then you go to Pro
national
Tour.
events,
And
right?
I did decent at Pro Tour, but, at that point, I wasn't really running too well yet. Or actually I was, but there was really no... we weren't doing like a team at Pro Tour. It was Ryan's going to throw his stuff in the truck and drive to Colorado And yeah, Billy Musgrave was my mechanic one year when I did when I went up to Colorado to do Pro Tour.
You had Billy Musgrave as a mechanic?
Yeah. No, I mean, me and him have always been, friendly. So I needed somebody who could work. And
God, he's got to be not a whole hell of a lot younger than you, right?
I think he's a year older than me.
Is he older? Is he
Is
really?
he? I think so, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's a year older. I don't know.
Well, what the hell is he doing in that?
We
Was he not running shifters yet? What was he doing?
No, he was running shifters, but so Billy got.
No, I'm sorry, because I've been down here since 11, but
Yeah.
like my recollection of how everything is, because I remember when they were doing arrows and like they were first starting out at MRC. But
Yeah, so you remember me mentioning that we sold arrows back then?
right.
Yeah, all their arrows came from us.
Oh, you
Yeah, so
Two Wild sold
yes,
chassis to the Musgraves
yes, but it was before the Musgraves were MRC. It was just
when they were
It was
doing
just
the
Will and Billy.
it was Willie, it was Billy,
and just a couple other guys with
some of their
orange
buddies.
helmets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you remember Steve
Nice.
Berg,
Yeah.
Rick McAllister, all those guys. So how we all met them was
I had no idea that
They
you
were-
guys sold the chassis to them.
yeah, they were writing an article for Motocross Action magazine about, I think it was about the same time that all the four strokes were kind of taking over the world.
I was actually here. No, it was before that because I was here and they did a photo shoot
Yeah.
and we stopped them on the thing and whatnot. They had like black body work and whatnot.
Yeah, the whole
But
reason
there was no 206. There was no four strokes. Nothing. Nowhere.
No, but you also have to remember the mind of somebody coming from motocross. My dad in '96 or whatever it is, he had a shifter. He didn't get into a non-shifter because he looked at it as, it's beneath me.
Yeah, I've been doing gearbox for how
Yeah,
long?
it's kind of moto mentality. They look at it as, it's only a 125. It's not that fast. Well, we have traction here. You can use all of that power.
And we're on the
Right.
ground
Yes,
almost always.
we do our best. No, so we had sold them the Arrow because the whole purpose of the article they were writing was kind of to explore, other motorsports outside of motocross and what they cost in relation. Well, the reason we used the Arrow is because the Arrow was, I think it was $400 or $500 cheaper than the Tony Kart or the CRG. So they got Arrows. We built them up. I remember playing with all the different cylinders and all the different, silencers early on when they were making radiators and all that stuff.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yep.
And then Billy Musgrave is your mechanic. You see Grand
Yeah.
Junction?
Yeah, in Grand Junction, yeah.
Tell us how'd that go.
I suck at Grand Junction.
Nah, it was Billy.
No, nothing to do with Billy. No, I'm admittedly horrible at that track. I think the 2 times I've raced there, I've just stunk the joint up.
Let's talk about this for a second. And actually, by that, I mean a transfer of topics because we're going to go from, we talked about your driving and whatnot. Obviously, you do know how to wheel a shifter. You do know how to drive, and even in the tag, blah, blah, blah. I haven't seen you drive a whole hell of a lot lately.
Yeah.
But I have seen you wearing a 2 Wild shirt a lot. So I guess what I want to do is I want to ask you, what's that, like you had just said, you had just started with the business side of things. How's that transition happen? Where you go from being, I'm going to go kart racing, and dad's running the show, to dad's not running the show, to still running, to I'm not driving anymore, and I'm going to be 2 Wild karting owner and running the team.
So with whatever you do, there's going to be, trade-offs. With me driving and running the business, the business started to get busier. And the last cart to get done, the last thing to be loaded before we roll out, is my stuff. The customers are the priority. If it's not for them, I can't race. And it gets to a point as a driver in that position that you kind of get frustrated. Where and how that frustration manifests is something that you have to figure out how to deal with. If you want to continue to be successful as a driver, and if you want to be successful as a business owner. I got to a point where I felt like my performance was suffering, and in order for me to do better, I would need to spend more time driving. However, what made it financially possible for me to be driving was the business. So we have this chicken and egg conundrum. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, you know what? I've had a lot of fun. I've, raced all over the place. I've made my point. People know I can drive. Was I absolutely dominant? Did I go out and wipe the floor with everybody? No. Am I going to sit here and toot my own horn and say I'm special? No. I mean, I truly believe that anybody put into my shoes would have done, the same as I have up to this point. So I got to a point where I just said, I need to either pursue this as a business and build a future for myself, or I'm going to keep chasing this and pissing myself off.
This is the kind of conversation, the question that Derek and I have brought up
Yeah.
multiple times. It's that turning point of, do I want to try to be a race car driver, or do I want to go racing? Or do I find a way to make money in this industry that I enjoy and turn that page?
When I took the business over, I kind of alluded to it. It's like, the running joke in karting was, how do you make a small fortune, start with a big one? I knew it was an uphill battle. I'll never forget a conversation I had with, I don't know if you guys know him, named Andre Martins. He was Tony Kart Florida before OTK USA became OTK USA. And, he helped me out a lot with my racing. He's kind of the Brazilian stepfather I never wanted.
Between him and Travis, you got quite a few uncles.
No, I owe Andre a lot. And he's always been, very helpful, and it's always a pleasure when I run into him. He's out in Florida, obviously, but I remember going out to work with him when Tony Kart was supplying a couple go-karts for a TV show that was filming some segment. And he was talking to me about it because I was in high school at the time, and it was becoming obvious that I was going to take the business over. And I remember asking him about, his opinion of, for me driving, for me running the business. And he just said that if you truly want to be a race car driver, you have to be willing to give up absolutely every other part of your life. And if you're not able to do that, there's an army of people who are. And if it's important for you to go to school and go to parties, if you want to go drink on the weekends, that's a disadvantage. And through high school, I wasn't the type who went to parties. I wasn't drinking on the weekends. I actually hid all of my racing from all of my friends. Why'd you do that? So when I was in elementary school, I was just made fun of constantly. Nobody understood racing. Oh, you just sit in the go-kart, you turn the wheel.
Yeah, I got a lot of that too.
And, when you're a kid, when you're that age, and it's something you love so much, and it's such a part of your identity.
It turns into ridicule.
And then it just turns into something that everybody wants to ridicule you for. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So I wound up getting pulled out of that school because my parents didn't want me going to the middle school because there was a drug problem or something. And put into another school. Well, when I went into that school, I just kind of made the decision to myself that I wasn't going to tell anybody. They only knew what I was willing to tell them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a fresh start. I didn't tell them about anything. I was, if they didn't know to ask about it, I wasn't going to say anything.
So were you pretty, not to get carried too far off of it.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
Were you pretty social, or were you kind of just keeping to yourself and going to school, doing your work, and going home?
So it's kind of funny because I think that growing up in motorsports is a little bit of a unique situation where all of your weekends are racing.
Right.
And everyone's social life outside of school happens on the weekends because you've got homework during the nights, whatever it is. Everybody's got, you need to be in bed by whatever time, and you don't have a car, you don't have whatever it is. So I was on good terms with everybody. I had friends. I mean, I was one of the kids where I could kind of float around wherever. By the time I went back to a public high school, I could go hang out with anybody, and it was cool. But I didn't have anything tying me to anybody.
Gotcha.
I wasn't the kid that was getting called of, yeah, we need to go to a party. Oh, yeah, hell yeah, call Ryan. But, you know, my interest back to high school was racing. So it's not poor me. It's just I was into different stuff.
Yeah. But talking about, the sacrifices becoming a race car driver, like every now and again, Mike and I will have the conversation with Rob about when he was trying to do it.
Yeah.
And, the scenario he always brings up was he wasn't willing to, live in his van like all those other guys were.
Well, the other part that I learned real early on was, I mean, keep in mind, when I was coming up through this, I don't remember exactly how old when like the real estate collapse happened. Well, when that happened, it was like all of a sudden everybody pulled the curtain back and you could see what everybody in the pits, who was living beyond their means. And I mean, I remember watching 2-3 families basically be completely destroyed because people were financing their racing with, second mortgages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'd already seen my family go through losing everything. I'm not going to go ahead and, bet the family fortune that I don't have on it. I mean, I understood that financially speaking, I was at a disadvantage. But, one thing my dad had always taught me was just, it's your job to go do it better, faster, cleaner. And, we're going to hold you to a higher standard, and you've got to make it work with what you've got. So, did I have a disadvantage? Sure. Am I going to whine about it? No. I mean, I still had good equipment. I still had whatever it was. And I was still happy to be at a track. And I was stoked I was racing. So when people were talking about, as soon as I had a little bit of success and everyone, oh, when are you going to cars?
Right.
By the time I got to high school, one thing that really caught my eye was, different videos of, karting in Europe and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's cool because...
And again, you'd grown up with one of your early coaches, Colin Fleming, having gone through some of that same kind of stuff.
No, I mean, seeing Colin Fleming go through the driver search. I remember when I was real young meeting Everett and Phil Giebler, watching him go through the different ranks. I mean, Travis Irving went to Europe with Top Kart. I mean, so many people that have been in my life I've seen go after it. And some of them absolutely are better drivers than I am and were better funded. So I always looked at that trade-off of, you willing to sell your soul to the devil for this? And it's like, I love what I do and I want to continue enjoying it. I don't want to go ahead and put myself into a situation where it makes me miserable.
So did you have much of an admiration to go try to do cars, or it was just a thought and you saw all the other drivers trying to do it, you're like, not for me?
Yeah, and i.e., are you growing up going, I want to be a race car driver out of the gate? Or
Well, every kid wants to be a race car driver. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
So, when I was in cadets, absolutely I wanted to, but did I actually, did I have the capacity to really think of what that involved and what that meant? Not at all. By the time I started to see a little bit of success in karting, I kind of understood what was going on, and I started to see that, talent is expected, bring money.
Yeah.
Well, I knew for damn sure my family didn't have money. So it wasn't that I didn't want to, but it's,
you were maybe mature for your age,
yeah,
or
you
you understood what
I
the
was
hell
I was
going
just
on.
realistic enough about it where it's
Yeah.
like there wasn't a moment where my dreams of being a race car driver died. It was just I accepted what my
almost-
reality was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they almost were quelled before they could really get into any kind of
Yeah.
cloud status.
No, and I mean some of my closest friends are professional drivers now. I don't envy it. I mean, the one thing people don't talk about with becoming a race car driver is, okay, you get the ride. Now what? You're not guaranteed a future.
Stressful. Well, and actually,
So and there's an army of people who, like we just said,
yeah.
are out there who are willing to do your job, but they're willing to pay to do your job.
Right.
Well, so I was talking to Mike recently. The podcast I started listening to a few years back was Dinner with Racers.
Yep.
And the episode I listened to recently was with Boris Said. I forgot what, I think it was one of the BMW teams he signed with for the U.S. Championship or whatever it was called at the time. But he gets the call from the team owner, and he goes, okay, and he's like, I'll send you a contract, all this stuff, review it. So he goes over it with a buddy of his who I think is a lawyer, and he goes, basically, this says you're not going to make any money throughout the whole year. You're not going to gain anything except to get to race. Calls the team owner back. He's like, hey, I was kind of going over it, and this is what I'm interpreting it as. What do you think? He's like, yeah, it sounds about right. He goes, well, you think I can get something? He goes, I got 5 more guys I can call right now that will take it. And he, at that point, he goes, screw it, let's do it. And that right there is a moment you think of, am I going to make the sacrifice or not? Am I going to go a whole year with no income?
And obviously either trying to live free, which means on somebody else's dime, obviously.
Yeah.
Or working a second job, third job, fourth job, whatever it is.
Well, and then, okay, congrats, you've made it. And now you're talking about working another job.
Yeah.
Well, we just had this whole conversation about I'm working within the industry. And I'm at a point where I feel like, you can't do both without compromising your performance in either.
Yeah.
And any way you scratch it, there may be somebody else that they can call that's got the money. Well, if you don't have the money and you got the deal where you got to go find money to live, well, then you're not putting the extra time that they're putting in to practice, test, etc.
Yeah, you're
always missing out
mentally,
somewhere.
you're compromised.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, it sounds like you figured it out. I mean, you're not an old guy.
No,
right?
not at all. I'm 28 now.
Yeah, you're still pretty damn young, and you've been running the team for a bit now. We're talking about a good several years ago that this happened.
Yep.
So, and again, going back to kind of the beginning of what we were talking about, learn by doing and kind of just retaining all of this knowledge. But I happen to know that when you do flip that switch and you go, hey, I'm not going to drive anymore. I'm basically all in on running the team.
Yeah.
Success comes.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's one thing where, we were so as a team, I was, very fortunate to work with some good drivers. Louis Pagano and Jake Craig, we had, a lot of success with in 2014 and 2015. 2014 I was still driving, but obviously my priority was, was the success of the business really. And it was just one of those things where I continued driving because it really allowed me to communicate better with the people I was working with. And that's one thing that, I've got a lot of respect for like Mike Rollison. Mike still drives. And, whether people want to admit it or not, if the person you're working with as a tuner or a coach or whatever it is hasn't spent a lot of time driving or isn't familiar with the equipment or whatever it is, how can you expect them to be as good as one who has? And that was one advantage that I had working with, both Jake and Louis, was I understood the karts because I'd done it myself. I would consider both of those drivers more talented than myself. And I was probably a little bit more technically minded than both of them. So, working together with both of them as a team, it was more just like, the environment was like hanging out with a friend. I mean, obviously we knew we had a job to do. But the communication was much more natural. I mean, I knew what to expect from, with working with Jake. You eventually learn what the driver's like and dislike. You learn, whatever year it is, there's going to be minor variances in the chassis themselves. Italy has a nasty habit of, we changed the material for the cross member right there, and, the press release says nothing changed. Well, officially nothing changed. Well, you better figure out what you're going to work with, because it's not like you're going to pull out a quiver of year-old go-karts that they don't make anymore. And as a business, I can't make a business out of that. Yeah, here, we have a lot of success. We're using stuff you can't buy. So come on over here and be frustrated with me inevitably because you're not successful because we didn't sell you the right stuff.
Yeah, and I've actually heard that before with other situations where you have a manufacturer that has their special models that are only used at, let's say, the national level, the tip-top guys.
Yeah.
And they're kicking ass.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can't get that.
Yep.
That's not the homologated stuff.
Oh, and it's not an issue of homologation. A lot of people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what homologation really is.
Maybe I'm one of them.
And
Sounds like.
no, and it's one of those things where in the United States, no one needs to know that. The only reason I know all that stuff is because, in high school years, I just became obsessed with everything karting. So I was, I would check e-karting news twice a day. I would read every single press release. I'm following all of the race results. I'm following all that stuff. I mean, I was just completely entrenched. I mean, I would go to school. I would hate being at school, and then I would come home and geek out on kart stuff. I mean, I could probably still tell you which drivers were with what teams and where they are now and all that, just because, I still keep an eye on it. I'm not as rabidly obsessed as I once was, because you get to a point where you can't take information in as fast.
And you realize that's not the best use of your time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, at some point you get a girlfriend.
Hopefully.
Yes.
And hopefully maybe they also spent a lot of time looking at e-karting news.
Yeah, no, I don't shit where you eat. So with homologation, a kart can be homologated, and what's homologated about that is the number of bends, the rough location of them, but not the actual call out for the angles of the bends, the material the tubes are made out of, or where those bends are placed in the chassis.
I.e. the small differences, perhaps, as they test and tune at the sharp end.
So you can have
trickle down.
So you could have. I'll just use it as an example. You could have one go-kart, two go-karts that have the exact same homologation validity, completely different. You can go ahead and have one that, although the tubing diameter is the same, and you could lay it over the other one. You change the height of the bearing hangers in the rear end. That's not homologated. That changed on the OTK shifter chassis from 13 to 14. Nobody told us, but eventually we couldn't figure out why it was not acting the same way.
But to your point, it sounds like there is absolutely a situation where you may not be selling what's actually winning.
With Tony Kart, I can say that is absolutely not the case. There is nothing special.
Gotcha.
If you're on the factory team, there's going to be prototypes. But those prototypes are pretty damn clearly marked.
Right.
And most of the time, stay with them. When the factory team goes to a race, they're going to have a prototype they work with, and they're going to have the standard chassis to compare it against. It has to be that way. I mean, we can't get angry about the manufacturers trying to do R&D. All they're trying to do is make a better product that they can sell you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, your success is their success.
Well, I suppose it'd be different if the factory team's winning and everybody else is losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one thing which I'll say I think OTK did a good job was in not having an official race team in the U.S. in recent history. It has gone ahead and really elevated the exposure that the dealers get. But on the other hand, being one of the people who went out and had that success with that product, it's kind of crappy because, we went out and won Pro Tour 2 years in a row, Rotax Nationals, Supernats. I mean, kind of everything there was to win for the classes we were in. But, if we go win in Indiana, is, Joe from Indiana going to call me and order a go-kart? No. He's going to call his local dealer, which I can't blame him for that.
The luckiest he'll get is he'll buy the cart at the track.
You know, and that, although rare, it does happen.
So what you're saying, though, is that you go out there, Too Wild, a Southern California run, they go out to win whatever they win.
Yeah.
That is good on paper, and everybody knows that Too Wild is a good team.
Yep.
They absolutely know that the driver's a good driver, and that the chassis is a good chassis.
Yep.
The one thing that a Joe Blow from wherever can actually go and dial that in is the chassis.
Yep.
There's absolutely no reason to call up Too Wild to get said chassis. I can get absolutely everywhere else.
Yeah.
So what is the benefit to Too Wild going and doing these things other than establishing that they know what the hell they're doing?
So after 14 and 15, we had a lot of success. And then I kind of got to a point where it's like, 16 we did Pro Tour again with Louis. Wasn't as stellar of a season for one reason or another. A lot of it I think is just the competition caught up. People started to have a better understanding of what they were working with.
Still spent the same amount of money though to go and do those things.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that was great though is, SCUSA, if you go out and perform at Pro Tour, you end up winning a championship, or I don't know if everybody on the podium gets it, but they'll cover entry fees and your race tires. But if you think entry fees and your race tires are what's costing the money, you're deluded.
Travel, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Just the travel and the time. But I got to a point where I just kind of felt like, listen, I proved my point. We went out and won everything. Well, I'd really like to make some money now.
Yeah, it wasn't like you guys went out and won everything, and here comes the sales.
Yeah, win on Sunday, sell on Monday is a little bit of farce.
Yeah,
but
we learned the same thing with the CSK Racing team. We started the CSK Racing team with this hope that we were going to have this graduation through us, and so on and so forth. And granted, it was more about trying to put it out there and like give people an opportunity. But the reality is that.
Well, the hard part was it was fundamentally a different model than what you guys have really built.
Well, fair.
Yeah,
yeah, and at the end of the day, when we're trying to get someone from the Arrive and Drive, etc., to move into our game, and we've had success. We've had really good success over the last 3 seasons.
3 years,
yeah.
And we're in our 4th season now, and we're not seeing this. Our team has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's not like we've gotten worse. The reality is that it's not super special, for one, and for two, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of different opportunities to go and grab a 4-stroke 206 on any make chassis.
No, and I think there's a lot of debate within the industry about the 206s. Some people are on the side of, the people who buy 206s, they're never going to spend a dime, blah, blah, blah. They don't go anywhere. Then there's people who say, we need to sell as many 206s as we can because, we get them in, it's the old drug dealer model. Your first hit's free. Well, in this case, 206, it's pretty damn cheap. And if you fall in love with it, next thing you know, you're gonna want a little bit more. So you're gonna get a KA, you're gonna get a Rock VLR, whatever it is. Next thing you know, you're in an
X30.
You're an X30, a Rock GP, a shifter of some sort, whatever it is.
The percentage of that is so low.
But the people that I've found will buy a 206 and get into racing have, the people who really bite on it. Like Pietro is a good example, in my opinion. He's bugged me about getting into a KA. Wants a little more.
Yeah.
Because he's gone from being, the rental cart shows up at a competition. I think he was a big deal in the Arrive and Drive stuff.
No.
No, he wasn't? Okay.
Yeah, nothing against Pietro. He's starting to become one.
Okay. So anyhow, okay. Yeah,
he's one of those guys that does a little bit of both at the same time. It's starting to come on, and he's already grabbing the next gear and staying in the same one.
No, I remember when we were working with him, he'd make these jumps, and I guess a lot of that kind of carried back over to the sport cart Arrive and Drive stuff, because I remember getting a text message from him after one of the races out here, and him just being through the roof excited, and thanking me and Cameron and everybody who'd been, and John, everybody been working with him, because he felt like what he learned on the competition side actually carried back over to the rental side.
And in those packages, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard for me to comment one way or the other because it's just so not my world.
Right.
Then I think there is definitely people who the 206 is a perfectly good intro to karting. With that said, I think that as an industry, and this is why I've kind of changed my business model recently, all the shops have become teams. When we were talking about 100 years ago, when it was, we didn't really have a team, we weren't charging people for pit, anything like that. Well, that model doesn't work. Well, now the people who get into karting, their conception of karting is, more professional than I think they understand. they see it as something that's more polished and more glamorous than it needs to be. And there's a certain perceived cost there that isn't necessarily true. And I feel like the glamorization of the big races and all of that stuff, you have to have it. But at the same point, if you allow that into the clubs, it can kind of scare people off.
It's like I remember, so 2015 was when I did LEKC, and that was the first time I did any competition karting.
Yep.
And it was big. The club was,
Oh, absolutely.
it was a lot of entries and a lot of different teams, and it was intimidating as hell coming from arrive and drive karting, and mostly because one, the size of the paddock and just seeing everything, it's super busy to walk through, but how legit the teams looked. It felt like a freaking IndyCar race for go-karts. You know?
No, and I think for the broad image of the sport, it really helps legitimize things.
Yeah.
However,
for
I
sure.
think for the actual health and perception of the sport, I don't know if it has those same benefits. I mean, if we'll take LAKC, for example, LAKC got to the point where, it was real big. I mean, it was uncommon in, 14, 15 to have a race where it was under 200 entries. And it was all teams. I mean, there was a couple years where, in my opinion, winning a championship at LAKC might have been harder than Pro Kart. And LAKC,
and a lot of the same people showing up to both.
No, exactly. And part of it is that LAKC, we go back to Colin Fleming, Travis Irving days. I mean, I remember my dad and Colin joking about how we're going to a club race, Colin. We're not letting you have new tires. You shouldn't need new tires. It's a club race. The idea was, if you have one of these national level heavy hitter drivers, I'm sorry, if you go to a club race, you should be on used tires to go ahead and even the playing field with with guys who don't have the same resources or, track time. But that's not the way it is anymore.
It's a nice way to think, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and especially in something like tires, where at the end of the day, you're
Well,
buying speed.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is, back then we used a lot harder tires.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But granted, it doesn't matter how hard the tires are, if you want to be at the front, you're going to be on a new set at qualifying.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I mean, going back through all this kind of stuff, man, I mean, obviously we talked about you as a munchkin getting on up and obviously going through the karting ranks, etc., and how you did in shifters. And there was like, okay, hey, I've won a championship regionally and whatnot.
Sure.
And then you hit the pause button, and then you end up having arguably more success as a owner.
Yeah.
Much ado.
Yeah, thank
the things that you learn as a driver and whatnot, and also, as you had mentioned before, on basically the same chassis, owning, learning, dissecting.
Yeah, I mean, eating your own dog food.
Exactly. You know what the hell's going on with that particular deal. What is because again, we're not going to see the 2 Wild trailer at the kart track here with a big team coming out the side of it these days.
Yeah.
What's the change? What's the transition from you going from Pro Tour champion, Supernats champion, and these different elements to kind of where we are today?
So it kind of falls back into what I was talking about with, the hyper professionalization of things. I feel like all of the shops have kind of stopped being shops. There are some around still for sure, but they've all become teams. And I feel like these teams end up just going from race to race to race to race. And if you're constantly busy at races, how do we have a good introduction to the sport? How do we guide people through, the fragmentation that we have? I mean, there's so many people who go out and buy a go-kart and have no idea what they're getting themselves into, other than the fact that I'm going to buy this thing, I'm going to have some fun. I mean, people getting into karting buy a go-kart in the same way that, you or I would go out and maybe buy a used jet ski or a mountain bike or whatever it is, because, it's a recreational activity. They're all kind of the same. You can kind of spend as much or as little as you want. And I feel like as an industry right now, we haven't seen as many people coming into the sport as we have in the past. And I mean, we can sit there and speculate about, is it economic? Is it, is it the classes that we have? Is it the packages we offer? is the sport too expensive? I think a lot of it is just the accessibility of it. So where I'm kind of moving my focus to is, people's first steps into karting. I'm still going to go ahead and have, kind of that team type presentation or product, but offer it to a market right now that I feel is completely underserved. I think, people who want to get into karting, well, there's still people who want to drive a go-kart who maybe they want to have maybe they don't have time, maybe they don't have a place to store it, maybe whatever it is. So, we have storage, we have transport, we have, track support. And if they really want to go into the competition side of it, I have some fantastic, contacts, relationships, whatever, that I'm happy to pass them off to. Because at some point we have to stop trying to be everything to everybody. And, if we can be mature enough to go ahead and say, listen, you want to go do this stuff, the best fit for you is, this guy or this guy. I think a lot of who people choose to run with in terms of teams, has less to do with the actual product nowadays than it does with, who they identify with. And, there's a certain amount of tribalism to it.
It's the chemistry.
Yeah.
Mike and I were just talking about that. So this year I'm running with Saragusa over at Formula Works. And, I was telling Mike the other day, as long as Tony doesn't do anything stupid and choose a complete shit chassis, I enjoy hanging out with him a lot, and I'm pretty sure I would stick with him for a while. You know?
No, Tony is one of the guys I've gotten to know more recently, working with the tire stuff and all that. I mean, it's been kind of cool to get to know the different people who I've known in the periphery, for so long. I mean, obviously Tony's a little bit newer to the industry, but
right.
Alex Sanders is a great example. I don't think prior to me working with, on the tire stuff, that I'd ever really had a meaningful conversation with Alex. And you know what? He's a good dude. I mean, Tony, Tony's awesome. I don't know his kid very well.
Right.
But I'd count them all amongst friends at this point. I mean, he's always been very reasonable. I mean, everything's been very friendly.
So you've gotten a chance to go from basically having, arguably, say a dog in the fight, if you will, kind of having your own deal, to now almost being a little bit more global, if you will. At least, and by global, I just mean spread across the sport more than anything else with the distribution of Hoosier, the tire we're talking about.
Yeah, the position that I'm trying to occupy within the industry, I feel like, is not a direct competitor to any of the people who I was, working against in the past. So, if you put yourself into a position where you're not competing against everybody, all of a sudden that relationship's not very tense. There's no, trade secrets. There's no whatever.
Changes perspective completely.
Yeah, and it's really made my experience within the industry a lot more enjoyable.
Low stress, a fresh take on it, if you will.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's still stress. There's still, the old chasing people around for money or whatever it is.
As long as you're in karting, that's always it.
But the good news is when you're only dealing with the business side of them, there's less people to chase. So,
well, I'll say this too. Like I've said ad nauseum about how I like to go about doing things and being neutral and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's also, I think, why it's so much damn fun and so enjoyable for me, is because I don't have to worry about upsetting anybody because I'm not aligned specifically in it. I'm in it for the global.
Yeah.
I do have my own things when I'm a driver and I want to do well, etc. and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then I have the other half where obviously I'm the GM of the kart track and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, man, do I want us all to do well.
Yeah.
Because if we're all doing well, we're all doing well.
Yeah.
And we're all having fun and etc. And I think that's been one of the things that, like I said, it really makes it more fun. And to your point, Ryan, about going from the fellow competitor in a series where there could be a mutual respect as a competitor to just, well, we're not competing at all. Actually, we're on the same team now, and you're on the same team now with the paddock.
Yeah, no, it's really cool because there's, just talking, it's a small world. We all hear everything we all say. And there was a few people who early on, when they heard it was me, were cranky about it. And those are the ones that I've really just gone out of my way to try and just listen. I'm going to trip over myself to just try and kill you guys with kindness. You want me to go ahead and bring tires to your house? No problem. You want me to go ahead and, satisfy some sort of messed up late night order or whatever? I'm going to make sure that, I do my job as well as I can. And I'm going to make sure that, I've been in all of their shoes. I know that customers don't always get back to you in time to be able to be prepared for something. Well, at the end of the day, that falls on you, and it sucks. So
you're providing the service.
Yeah. So being able to go ahead and just, have that willingness to work with them above and beyond what they would expect has actually put me into a position where, I have more of a friendly relationship with everybody. And it's kind of funny because in a certain respect, I kick myself because a couple of them make comments like, yeah, you think about driving a kart again? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. They're like, yeah, well, you should come on down, drive with us. And I'm like, wow.
Can't be anything.
Wow,
if I wasn't
tied to a shop all this time, maybe I would have had some more opportunities.
Right? Yeah.
Isn't that weird how it works?
Yeah, no, and that's there's definitely a trade-off no matter where you are or what position it is, what your goal is, because, I truly don't believe anybody has it really any meaningfully better or worse than anybody else. It's just you're playing by different rules towards a different end.
Well, and obviously you've taken that kind of that thought process as you guys have moved as now a business owner.
Yeah.
Right. And moved from driver to owner to top level, winning the big stuff, to changing everything that you did, changing the entire model to more of I'm going to try to work this, that, like you said, this missing step, if you will, in the ladder.
Yeah.
And again, not the team or anything like that. And I think what's interesting is we'll see you at Cal Speed's Machismo 12-hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you are that kind of finding that niche.
Yeah.
Part arrive and drive, part competition karting.
Yeah.
But you're still bringing that same high level, the same team, the same group of people that went out and won Supernats, the one Pro Tour, etc., is now going 206 racing at an endurance race, arrive and drive. We are talking about this is for fun. There's no money. It's still important for all that do it. But you're still bringing that high level, and you're kind of finding that niche.
There's, just me personally, there's a certain amount of ridiculousness that I just enjoy. And the Machismo thing I blew off, I don't know how many times Cameron told me about it. Cameron obviously worked with you guys, and he was a big part of that whole operation. Yeah. And, the first 2 years that he worked with me, he's like, yeah, we should go do Machismo. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're full of it. And then finally,
who's going to pay for this, Cameron?
Yeah, no, and I remember sitting down with Cameron and being like, listen, if you want to do this,
I like how you had to you got so frustrated.
Listen,
probably.
I'm
like, all right,
way older than you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm your boss. Okay.
No, and I consider Cameron a brother. I mean, but with that said, there's my experience and Cameron's experience are in different areas. And I'll never forget the first time we sat down, and it might have been Machismo, Supernats, whatever it was. And I was just kind of showing him like, hey, here's what I go through. Here's how the planning process works. Here's how prices are determined. And there was kind of a chuckle moment. He was like, ooh.
He's like,
yeah. I just thought we could do this for cheaper. And I'm like, well, we could, but why?
Business.
Do you want to go work for nothing? No, it would be fun. Yeah, we can do it for. We can break even, but
right.
Then I don't have a way to, pay my rent. So
yeah, at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it, it's got to make, quote, financial sense.
Yeah, but the thing with Machismo was really the fact that, I wanted to bring kind of an environment and a focus to that race that, anytime I'd come out I did a 4-hour with Eric Molinati.
Right.
And I was completely blown away by the arrive and drive guys, the level of preparedness that they were bringing to that. And
isn't that so real quick? Isn't that so easy from the competition karting side? Isn't it so easy to underestimate the arrive and drive anything because you're not maybe putting in as much money, you don't own the equipment, so it's quote rental carts.
So at first I had that opinion.
Right. And that's what I mean. Out of the gate,
And
no
Cameron had that
experience.
too.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people have
Yeah.
had that.
But the biggest thing that's kind of put me off on the arrive and drive stuff was
That it's Sodies.
no. I don't get me wrong.
So brand specific.
Yeah, God.
No, and I mean I don't mean to sound like a whiner, but whenever I went to any of those types of events, I just felt like such an outsider. Like I feel like that the same thing that was going on in competition karts and kind of still is with regards to everything being way too serious and people like I can go to one of those races, but I don't really feel comfortable walking up to whoever it is and shooting the shit with them.
Well, and to be fair, anytime and our guys are guilty of it, you know, our drivers, they see a painted helmet show up and do good that they don't know, they're going to make you feel like an outsider, you know.
Yeah, and my thing was like you know, when I was approaching the rental kart side of it, I didn't have any illusions that I was going to show up and just beat everybody because it's just a different type of racing. It's like the best example I can give is when Michael Schumacher came to Vegas to race Supernats. There was people who thought, oh, he's just going to show up and win. But everybody who knew what was really going on knew he's going to do well. But this isn't what he does.
Right.
And I feel like there's this almost both sides do it to each other where the competition side completely underestimates the arrive and drive side. But then the arrive and drive side has this attitude that I don't know.
If you give me the same equipment, I could do just as good. Like that's
yeah,
actually
the arrive and drive crowd tends to think that it all hinges on the equipment more than it does.
right.
With that said, the competition side, being somebody who is a shop and a team owner, the competition side also thinks that that the equipment means more than it really does.
It's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
And part of my frustration that led to me changing my position in the industry was I was really tired of listening to people who the customer's always right. I can go ahead and give them all the advice and the guidance and whatever. But if at the end of the day they say, oh, this chassis is no good, okay, no problem.
And I think there's
We'll get you another one.
I got a brand new one waiting right here for you.
Right. Yeah, you don't like that one? I got another one. It's right over here. Here's
Yeah,
the price tag.
Oh, you don't like the TrueTech engine? You want the P1 engine? I mean, the truth of it all, they're both perfectly good.
Yeah.
And
But I'll blow the
think-
dust off the Euro for you.
Yeah, nice. I think that's one of the situations about the arrive and drive that is kind of nice. We are literally the promoter and the everything about, like, we are the team, we are the promoter, we are the cart manufacturer, if you will.
Yeah,
everything about it, it's us. We're the engine builder. The best part about the arrive and drive is those that complain about the equipment.
You just hand them another one.
Well, by default, because the rules, and you can't get the same cart twice. But the best thing about it is that the number of people are going to drive that same piece all day.
Oh yeah,
they're
okay. So if it is off, it's going to be just as off for you as it is the 10 other people that are going to drive it.
But why are they so much faster than you? Oh, I guess the cart's not that bad, is it? There's that. Now, don't get me wrong. There's always a situation where you have a one that slips through the cracks, etc. But I guess the point being is that the arrive and drive guys always are like, man, because they've figured out how to drive, etc. They can move on up, and if they had the equipment, they could be the next Schumacher. To your point about Schumacher going to the Supernats, and just he's going to kill it. No, he was supposed to do good. I akin this to when I was doing the arrive and drive stuff, like the indoor karting stuff, and I would go and do different events or whatever, and I was at the Jeff Gordon charity race and going against Jeff Gordon. He's the pro? No, I'm the pro. I'm the one who goes around and does it all the time. He's the Joe. If Jeff beats me, it's because I suck.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I was
your
the
world.
best guy on the track
Well,
because
so
that's
it's-
what I do.
It's funny because the same thing, I had a conversation on my way over here with a friend of mine who races in LMP1. He's got the 24 Hours of Le Mans coming up. I think it's tomorrow, actually, but it's a sim race.
Oh,
Right.
So he's sitting here kicking himself because he gets in a car, he performs, and he's, look at the data. He's great. He's in a simulator right now, and he's like, dude, kind of sucks. He's like, I'm not terrible in it. He's like, but I am nowhere near as good in a sim as I am in real thing, because he's like, it's just not what I do.
It's racing.
Yeah.
It's just a different genre. It's a different kind.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's where it's like, I have a ton of respect for the guys who come out and do the arrive and drive stuff. If you take arrive and drive karting seriously and it's fun and you have a good time, and that means you bring out monitors and you do data and you have radios and you've got a team environment you've built around it, and that's what makes it enjoyable. Hell yes. If you come out here and you throw a wad of cash at Sarah and you throw your helmet on and you go out and you run around mid-pack, stoked for you. I mean, the bottom line is there's something for everybody in whatever it's going to be. I mean, if that's arrive and drive karting, if that's, competition karting recreationally, I mean, I've got customers who throughout the years have bought, in my perspective at the time, the dumbest crap imaginable that I'm like, you can't even race this anywhere. There's going to be no resale. Why the hell would you buy this? Yeah. Well, it's badass.
That's enough for them.
And that makes them happy. But it's like I've kind of come full circle on my, motorsports journey, where it's like, I was the snobby racer who, why would anybody waste their time on this stuff? But now I'm at the point where it's like,
you have an appreciation for it.
Yeah, racing is not logical. None of us do this because it's a good financial decision. None of us do this because, it's necessary for our health. We do it because we love it. And we all love it for a different reason. That doesn't take anything away from anybody else's enjoyment of it.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge point too, because as Derek and I have gotten a chance to experience, not just working here and whatnot, but on the other little things that we do. And again, Derek and I have the opportunity to not just be on the arrive and drive side, but the competition side.
Yep.
With doing the CSK racing team, being a team, team owners and stuff like that, managers and coaches, and we've literally been able to be a part of damn near every single part of the industry in that regard. And then
Next
add
step
to
is
it.
we just got to sign people's checks. I think that's the only part we're missing.
I don't want to know. That means I'm giving the money.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
I'll tell you right now, that's the most stressful part.
Yeah. and then you add into the fact the Cal Speed Lives and having that community aspect and being a part of it, and absolutely even this podcast and having these kind of conversations with people in the industry, where at the end of the day, it's just what you said. It's a hell of a lot of fun. We all have fun for a different reason.
Yeah.
Hell of a lot of passion for it. We're all talking karting. We're all doing karting. And damn it if it ain't a hell of a lot of fun.
No, and that's where I've what really got me my appreciation of that and that concept was, I have a customer, Michael Risley. You know him.
Yes.
He's been driving for years now. He's got, one of each type of kart, and he drives all of them. Is he the fastest driver in the world? Nope. Is he a bad driver? Not at all. He goes out there, he escapes his job, he gets on track, and just like any of us, can't think about anything else because we're busy. And there's a certain peace, enjoyment, whatever you want out of it, that, I'd rate him against one of my best customers. And anybody in competition's probably never heard his name. I mean, I get so much enjoyment out of going to the track with guys just like that, who, even if they don't race, racers are a bunch that really aren't widely understood, because it's not all about stick and ball. Nobody's going to a barbecue, in mainstream sports. Nobody goes to a barbecue to talk about, F1. I mean, there was a time with NASCAR, but that's fallen off. So just having those types of guys who, they may not be, in competitive racing, but we're all kind of hardwired the same. We all
could
have
almost
similar
say that
interests.
you could almost say that kind of person is the purist.
Yeah.
They're enjoying it in its
For what it
most
is.
simplest form. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, it doesn't matter if it's a drive and drive. It doesn't matter if it's competition. I mean, for want of something, you can justify anything. I mean,
Yeah.
people look at a go-kart and say, how in the hell does anybody spend that much money on a go-kart? It's just a go-kart. Well, the amount of money I've seen some people spend on go-karts can buy a nice car. Well, for some people, what they spend on a car can buy some people, it's an entry-level airplane. Well, next thing you know, you have a goddamn space station.
It's the interests. It's what you wanted to get involved
So it's
in.
like, I feel like as a sport, we just need to do a better job of catering to people and, people understanding that whatever the sport means to them and however they enjoy it, we're happy that they're here and, we're all a part of it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, I don't know, I think we all have more in common than we do, than we have differences.
And now that we're getting to the other side of this COVID deal, and you don't have to do so much out of the box thinking, maybe, and you can get back into the actual what's the other half of it? Oh yeah, 2-wheel karting.
Yes.
And maybe play around with that a little bit more. What is on the horizon? What are you doing with 2-wheel karting here now that we're getting actually back to the racetrack? So,
as you know, my Machismo was pretty rough on equipment. Oh boy. So, since then I've my plan was to go ahead and put stuff together and have some arrive and drive stuff, which, my arrive and drives are, a little bit different than, cow speed arrive and drive stuff, obviously. Because I'll go to Adams, I'll go to Willow, I'll go to whatever track it is. Like I said, I'm on the phone over here. When you'd ask, well, why are you going to Adams? Well, I don't know. You can't eat chicken for dinner every night. Doesn't mean chicken's bad. It just means, some people want to drive some other stuff.
Right.
So I really want to focus on kind of the arrive and drive side where people are kind of taking their first steps into the sport. Get them familiar with what they're working on, get them outfitted, get them to the track and having fun, and then kind of guide them in whichever direction they decide they want to go. If they want to keep doing the recreational stuff, if they want to use it as an escape from work, we're going to the track on a lot of Wednesdays, Fridays, stuff like that. And it's a good professional crowd. Everybody's pretty easygoing. It's, even if you're not good at driving a go-kart or don't want to, it's been pretty damn good networking too.
Yeah, for sure. I gotta tell you, Ryan, this has been a hell of a lot of fun. This
was a good time.
Every
man.
single
I've
one of the
enjoyed it.
podcasts we do is a good time, but you kind of hit on it earlier with everybody being different, stuff like that, and every single one is different, and every single one's a good time. And Dan, this is a lot of fun. Let's say someone wants to do some of this arrive and drive recreational thing. How are they going to get a hold of you? How are they going to do it?
So obviously email's an easy one. Ryon, Ryon at 2wildkarting.com.
That's RYON.
Ah, yes. We forgot. My parents can't spell. That, or if you don't want to bother butchering my name, there's info at 2wildkarting.com.
It's INFO.
I was about to say,
want to make sure
it's not going to be INFA.
Yeah, it's not YNFO. I didn't let my dad spell that one.
You got a phone number or something? Is that a good way? Is email the best way for 2Wild?
Email is always the easiest way, just because, if we're working on something, our hands are full or whatever. Email goes directly to my cell phone. As much as I want to, I'll usually give all of my customers my cell phone number, and nobody needs to be a stranger, but I don't need it on the internet.
And obviously we're going to be going racing sooner or later. So for the teams and whatnot, trying to get the Hoosier tires, and you also I may not know how to say it. How do I say frame?
Yeah.
It is frame.
Yes.
The apparel or the safety gear.
Yes. So I'm the U.S. distributor for their motorsport as well as karting stuff. So if anybody needs any of that, I'm more than happy to talk about any of the off-the-shelf stuff, any of the custom stuff as well. Primarily I do custom stuff. I'm really trying to go ahead and build a network of dealers for that, just because I've been in their position. I don't want to go ahead and try and sell direct and cut everybody out of it. We've got a pretty good inventory of all the product now, so I just got another shipment of stuff today. It's been excellent working with them. I know the brand's been a mess in the last few years, but we're working hard to get that back on track. And then, I always tend to bite off more than I can chew as far as projects, but there's a little more in the works too. But anybody can get a hold of me. I'm an open book and happy to help with if that's getting you guys into karting or whatever. Reach out. I'm happy to advise.
And we're going to see it at Machismo this year for sure, right?
Definitely doing Machismo again. Not sure exactly.
Got to work on those karts.
Well, I mean, by that time,
arguably this year it's open chassis.
Oh, right.
So
arguably, I'm the guy who makes the rules.
Yeah.
No, and most of the equipment's already been replaced. So I'm pretty confident with the package that we have already. With Machismo, we've really focused on the off-track stuff to where if we have anybody who has whatever experience, we can really give them arguably a better chance than they would have with anybody else.
I think people would be. You have to probably do a little bit of searching for it. Maybe we can find it for our own.
The pit stop.
The pit stop stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, you guys have definitely gone above and beyond to try to find a little extra look at the Two Wild team.
No, when we did the math for it, it was pretty funny because we're like, well, wait a minute. So we can be like a second and a half off the pace the whole race, and still be in it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and give people the best odds they can.
It's a hell of a thing when you keep 4 tires on it and get out of the pits quick.
Exactly.
So 2 things really quick. I agree. I 100% agree with what you said earlier about the accessibility of the sport.
Yeah.
I think if that can get nailed down and that can become better and improve,
yeah,
the rest of it can really fall into place.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about packages, classes, whatnot. And then the second thing is you're 28. A few more years, you'll be a Masters. Do you think you might
do it?
Do you think you might jump back in and have some BS fun every now and again in a KA or an X30?
Yeah, and real quick, I want it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is last year's Machismo on the practice day the last time you had that racing suit on? I want to say you were out there. Was it last year?
Yeah. I don't think I drove this year.
Was it? Was it last year or the year before?
It was the year before you jumped in.
It was the year before I jumped in because the team that we had was physically incapable of continuing driving at that point. So I just said, okay, I'll throw on my gear and I'll get in. And
is that the last time you drove?
I mean, no, that wasn't the last time.
I don't think I've seen you drive anything here for a while.
It's been a night with no lights on.
Well, and at that was before. Oh yeah, because I didn't have my contacts, so I couldn't see shit.
Good thing we have enough lights out here.
Because the reason I came in was I was blind for the better part of half a lap, and I remember I was making my way around the track just counting. So usually,
for a guy who hadn't done any laps yet,
yeah,
pretty good. It's a hell of a track walk.
Yeah, no,
track run.
I basically just had a rhythm in my head, so it was like, don't get me wrong, I can't dance, but it's like when you see people in like a movie teaching each other how to dance.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
yeah.
So that
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's, yeah. So that's how I would drive the track when I couldn't see. So
Derek's point, we're gonna see it. Like you said, Masters. That's what revitalized my racing was becoming a Masters. We can see you back in the game, bud.
Something low key.
I want to, but at the same point, I don't want to.
Come on.
No, I mean, unfortunately, it's like there's nothing that stops me right now from driving.
Right.
I'm just in a position where, I've got other hobbies outside of racing for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
Right.
That take up a lot of time.
That's true.
And cost a lot less money, but are far more physically abusive. So I want to race. It's just a matter of, can I do it in a way that, that makes sense?
Well, you know what? I know where you can start. It's called the Super Series. It happens once a month. You should definitely do it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'll tell you what. Maybe even try some roundy round. We got some oval coming up here in a couple of weeks, buddy.
No, I've been kicking around the idea of building another kart for myself. Just, maybe not to go racing, maybe just to go
play around,
show up, and whether it's go, come out here on a Wednesday or something and
Yeah.
play around with the other guys, or if it's to, sneak out on a Monday and
It's an
clear my
upcharge
head.
because at that point it's coaching.
Nice.
You just have to be on the track. You don't
I like
necessarily
it.
have to be around him.
No, you're
Well, I'll tell you what. I
not
think
too far off.
I think I speak for Derek and everybody else that we wouldn't mind seeing the old Ryon Beachner helmet
Yeah,
out there
for
once
sure.
again. Once again, dude, hey, thanks so much for coming out here. This
Thank
has
you,
been a
guys.
hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It's a good
I
time.
got a feeling we'll have a Ryon Beachner episode 2 at some point.
Yeah. No, I'd be more than happy to come back.
Thanks again, bud.
Thanks.